Judeo-Christian worldview. And now, here is your host, Brannon Howse.
Welcome to the broadcast on this Thursday night, August 20th, 2026. Courtenay Turner is going to join us tonight. Todd Bensman, I pre-recorded interview with him yesterday. I'll bring that to you tonight. Todd Bensman, drone swarms, the border, and depending on who the next president is, maybe we're going to have a flooding of the border like we did during the Biden years. Again, also going to talk to Michael Weiner. I pre-recorded an interview with Michael yesterday on the bond market, how we're buying up our debt. We're buying up debt. We're buying our own debt. We got to borrow money to pay the interest, and so we're creating it out of thin air, folks. Quantitative easing, lots of fancy names. Oh, are you ready for inflation-altering pain? I think, unfortunately, it's coming. Inflation that will be life-altering. We'll get into that. But Courtenay Turner joins us tonight to respond to this book review that Patrick Wood and I did of J.D. Vance's book. She watched the hour and a half last night. And she also read a new article I wrote today over at worldviewtimes.com. Here it is. Peter Thiel, J.D. Vance, René Girard. He's the French philosopher that Peter Thiel loves, along with J.D. Vance, who he quoted many times, J.D. did, René Girard in his new book. And the meaning of the cross. And why this is real deception here, folks. And the connections, really, between this and the Frankfurt School, the cultural Marxist, the connections to what J.D. Vance is saying, and really corporate fascism, communitarianism. How he's bemoaning a mob mentality as promoted by René Girard, while I believe creating a mob mentality. And did you know that J.D. Vance is a liberal? Oh, yes, he's a liberal, folks, but many of you don't know that, but we're going to help you come to know that tonight. You're like, how do you know that, Brandon? Well, I read his book. He wants the government to get heavily involved in who can work and win, and mandating you have to have time off from vacation, mandating all kinds of benefits that the employer, business owner has to give to employees, that the government has got to ensure that every worker has a livable wage. Who defines livable wage? There's so much in here that tells you he's a liberal. That he's merging socialism with capitalism, which ceases to be the free market system. Capitalism being the pejorative of Karl Marx for what's really the free market system. But he also told us who he likes. Are you ready? Listen to who J.D. Vance says he likes in the Democrat Party.
I did this event at the Yale Federalist Society recently where they asked me for my 3 favorite Democrats purely in terms of policy outcomes. And I said, in order, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, and Tulsi Gabbard.
Wow. Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren? And it was in regards to what? Listen.
They asked me for my 3 favorite Democrats purely in terms of policy outcomes.
Policy outcomes. Tell me he's not a liberal. Oh, but he's changed, Brandon. No, he hasn't. Read his book that just came out in June. He hasn't changed. And who's pushing this guy? Well, none other than Don Jr. and his new wife. They just did a fundraiser last night at the home of Omid Malik. Isn't that the Muslim dude tied back to Tucker Carlson? Oh, these guys are remaking the Republican Party, folks. You should be very concerned. There they are. I think that's Mr. Malik himself. And there he is there they are with JD. Let me tell you something. I don't mean to be, too picky, but if a dude puts his hand around my wife that tight, we got a problem. Let me tell you something. You come to one of my conferences, men, you do not have to worry about me putting my arm around your wife. That's not going to happen. I don't do that. All right? I don't know. I don't like that, but whatever. To each his own. I'm like, I don't like touching other people's wives. That's not a good idea. So I don't know. That just creeped me out when I saw it, but whatever. What do you think of that, Logan?
Yeah, that's a little weird.
Would you want someone grabbing your fiance like that?
I don't think so.
No, I don't think so. But then again, your fiance is a beautiful lady. My wife's, your mother is a beautiful lady. And I just don't want men touching my wife, you know? Get your own beautiful wife. That's how I feel about it. And I don't care what your wife looks like. I hope you think she's beautiful, inward and outwardly. But I just don't do that. I do not do that. I do not put my arm around women other than my wife. I hug my mom. And if I do hug someone, it's a side hug. I hugged one of our friends the other day. She's in her 80s, and it was a side hug. I don't do that. And if, again, someone wants a picture, glad to take a picture. But I'm not prone to putting my arm around them. It would have to be someone I really, really know, like my future daughter-in-law. It'd have to be like my sister-in-law, somebody that's a family member, pretty doggone close. Randomly, I just don't do that. And I don't know. I just saw that. Maybe I'm too old school. I don't know. I just don't care for that. But whatever. To each his own, I guess, right? But there they are. So we're going to get into some of that tonight. By the way, here's the article over at the New York Post. And that is shockingly vulnerable U.S. power grid could result in 18-month nationwide blackout. Now, this is not new information. In fact, if you go over to Worldviewpedia, I actually put that in my Worldviewpedia earlier. The Federal Energy Regulatory Commission and the threat to America's power grid. And I talked about this. We have talked about this so much over the years. This is not new information about the power grid going down, targeting substations, okay? We've dealt with this many times in our documentaries and other stuff. Here's something from 2017. Worldview article, 2017. Talking about the attack on the power grid and utilities, the substations. Why is this back in the news? I think it's back in the news because Iran is threatening our critical infrastructure. Why is it Donald Trump has backed off of striking Iran? I think they have told him point blank, this is what we can do. I warned about this several years ago, using these kind of techniques and hacking to bribe the nation, to blackmail America. You want to do this? This is what we're going to do. You go back into Worldviewpedia and type in Brandon House warns about Russia, China, or Iran blackmailing America over the power grid, and I bet you'll find something. And this might be why this is coming back up. The Daily Mail had it. New York Post had this article. Let me just tell you something, folks. You guys all do what you want. But I'm prepared the best I can be for a power outage, whether that's 3 days, 3 months, a year. And the studies show that if there were a power outage in the United States nationwide, 90% of Americans would be dead inside a year with societal unrest, disease, and starvation. Now, you say, well, what if it's not down for a year? They're saying it could go down for 18 months or longer in this article. But what if the power grid were to go down for, let's just say, 18 weeks? What would you do? If you have to have medical care, that could be a real issue. We have doctors that I know in our neighborhood, people that I could hopefully rely upon and trade and barter with. Whoop. But aside from a medical issue, the issue of water and food and medicine, I hate those players that play. It's so distracting. Just stop. It's not going to let me stop it. How stupid. I don't want to see your garbage. So I have about 2+ years of food. I have medical bags, EMT bags. I have antibiotics. I said today on radio, a lot of you don't need to go on another cruise. That's nice, but you don't need to. You don't need to take another trip. If you don't have at least a year's worth of food, you don't need to go do any of that. Now, if you're very, very well off financially and you can do all those things and buy a year's supply of food, then you can do both. But most people have to budget. Their discretionary budgets are just that. They have to be discretionary. They have to use discretion in how they spend money. They have to budget for stuff. And if you don't have a year's worth of food and you don't have medical supplies and the water put away, then the last thing you need to be doing right now, folks, in this world is taking a cruise or a trip and spending money like that. You do what you want. But I remember the lady in North Carolina a year and a half ago that called into the program after they had that flooding out there, remember? So many people lost their lives in Eastern Tennessee and North Carolina, et cetera. And she called into the program and said, I was sitting in the dark thinking about what Brandon said, that one day you're going to be sitting in the dark thinking about my warnings and wishing you had prepared. And she said, that's exactly what I was doing. I was sitting in the cold and the dark thinking about you every night because you had told me this could happen to me. And she says, folks, be ready. Listen, it can happen. So do what you want. But I find it really odd that the media on cue is pushing this idea of the grid going down. Bring that down for a minute. Let me show you something else. Do you guys remember the World Economic Forum dude, Klaus Schwab? Because he talked about the idea. He's gone now. He's doing something different now. But he talked about the idea of the power grid going down. You guys remember that? Let me see if I can find that real quick, because that is very instructive, where he talked about the power grid going down. And so I think the timing on all this is quite interesting. All right, they're going to make me sit through a commercial, so we'll wait for that commercial. But while I wait to play Klaus Schwab, folks, we have everything you need. You can go get it from somewhere else if you want, but if you want to get these supplies from us so that you are ready and you'll support us at the same time, I invite you to do that at worldviewstore.com, worldviewstore.com, worldviewstore.com. We're talking freeze-dried food, emergency kits, solo stoves, so you can build a small little fire. We have the pots, so you can boil the water, and all that. Worldviewstore.com. By the way, we are closer and closer, almost by a weekly basis, to a full-fledged World War III. And I'll tell you why in a minute. But listen to what Klaus Schwab had to say back in 2020. Listen to this.
We all know, but still pay insufficient attention to the frightening scenario of a comprehensive cyber attack, which would bring to a complete halt to the power supply, transportation, hospital services, our society as a whole. The COVID-19 crisis would be seen in this respect as a small disturbance in comparison to a major cyber attack. To use the COVID-19 crisis as a timely opportunity to reflect on the lessons the cybersecurity community can draw and improve our preparedness for a potential cyber pandemic.
Man, he's just like got a central casting, isn't he? What are these globalists preparing? I don't know. I do know they keep talking about the poly crisis, many things hitting us at one time. Well, look at this. NATO prepared to defend all allies, says official after reports of Iran mulling attacks on U.S. targets in Europe. There you go. We seem to be moving closer and closer toward world war. I think we're already in a world war. It's just most people can't see that. You go over to Worldview Report today, worldviewreport.com, your daily aggregated news site. Here's another headline. Drone blasted NATO jet, destroys drone, loaded with explosives, meters from Black Sea, gas project, as irresponsible, Russia slammed. Okay? I don't know how much more it's going to take before NATO is involved in a war and America gets dragged in it due to Article 5 of NATO. I have no idea. But I know between the financial crisis, the death of the dollar, inflation, terrorism, hacking, I'd be very prepared. And I am very prepared as best I can. And if you want to do the same, I would recommend it. And if you want to buy again the products from us, you can. You can buy from someone else. But I would do it. Remember this: U.S. not prepared to handle drone attack from inside homeland. I find this article also and the timing of this interesting. Because what if the 9 or 10 power substations that they're warning about from the former Federal Energy Regulatory Commission guy, he's warning about the different power plant substations that could be hit, which again, that's the very topic we've been warning about with this guy. We have him in clips in one of my documentaries, actually. And he says 12-year-olds could do this with the internet, learn which ones to target as far as learning the data. So what if they were to target those substations, however, with drones? Well, the U.S. is not prepared to handle a drone attack from inside homeland. We already heard Northcom Deputy Commander say that. Connect the dots with the stories, folks. Connect the dots with the stories. And I pre-recorded an interview with Todd Bensman. I'm going to play tonight for you. And we talk about the drone swarms and drones coming from over the border, maybe in Mexico, or the drones coming from Cuba, 90 miles from Florida. I think all of this is very concerning. I'm not here to scare you. I'm not here to frighten you. But I am here to tell you, you might want to be prepared. Okay? Now, if you want to go to worldviewtube.com/sponsors, and then we're going to go to Courtenay Turner. So tweet, text, email, Facebook, Getter, True Social. Tell everybody to get on over here. Unless you want to be deceived, then you need to stay tuned, because we're going to tell you how I believe J.D. Vance and the people around him are deceiving you, twisting scripture and deceiving Christians, patriots, Christians that are also patriots. Now, if you want to get your health care in order, as far as if there's an emergency, get your antibiotics, worldviewhealthcare.com. worldviewhealthcare.com. If you want to join our leadership course, go through our 2-year leadership course. And at the end of that 2 years, you do it all online. We're going to send you a beautiful diploma worthy of being framed. And we're also going to give you all my PowerPoints. Well, I should say all my PowerPoints, but a lot of PowerPoints. A lot of PowerPoints. And the information you need to turn around and teach a class. Maybe even start a home church or teach at your current church, Bible study, Sunday school class, at a Christian school, homeschool co-op. Worldviewtalk.com. Worldview Water. All of this is there. Worldviewtube.com/sponsors. Melissa Protein. I'm taking that every day. Bella Grace. I take that every day. Gatatana. I take that every day. Numi. I swish with that. All of it's there. Worldviewtube.com/sponsors. Worldviewtube.com/sponsors. Let's get started. Joining me now is Courtenay Turner. I covered this on radio today, and I said she was going to be with us because I wrote a new article this morning. Here it is at worldviewtimes.com. I asked her to read it. Peter Thiel, J.D. Vance, Rene Girard, and the meaning of the cross. And I want her to respond to this article. I think we have a great conversation, or a very interesting conversation, to try to explain how the worldview of J.D. Vance applies to public policy. Because as I explained on radio today, there are 6 dominant worldviews. But what makes a worldview, in part, is that it can be applied to law, science, economics, history, family, social issues, education, and religion. And I would put this worldview more into probably the cosmic humanism, New Age, cosmic humanism category, because of its redefining of Jesus, redefining of the cross, more of a enlightenment, hidden knowledge, that if you can become enlightened, then you can know really how you should behave, that Christ died so we can all be enlightened, which is really a form of Gnosticism, which is very similar to what Satan said to Eve in the garden. Hey, eat of this tree, you'll be like God, you'll know good from evil, and you won't die. It's really the pushing of this idea of a hidden knowledge, and you can have this hidden knowledge. And that's, again, why Jesus had to go to the cross, was to awaken the conscience of man to the dangers of scapegoating, the group ganging up on an individual and making them out to be the problem when they're innocent and really a victim. Now, how do you take that and then redirect it toward public policy? Let's have that conversation with Courtenay Turner. Courtenay, welcome to the broadcast. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks so much for having me.
Okay, so you watched our interview last night. Before we get into what I just talked about, it was an hour and a half. Then you read my article. Let's start first with the hour and a half last night. What did you make of our conversation and the things that we were quoting from J.D. Vance's book last night? Patrick Wood and myself.
I'm very glad you did it, because I think J.D. Vance is very concerning, and very likely it does look like they're kind of running him, positioning him to possibly be the next candidate for president, or if possibly, I know we've talked about this before, if Trump doesn't even make it to full term, which is, of course, a possibility always, that, he will secede and be president. And I think that it's really important, even if he does become president, for people to understand what he is, what he represents, and not to be deceived. That doesn't mean that if he is president, he's our president, but we need to know what we're dealing with. And right now he's our vice president, so we definitely need to know what we're dealing with still. But I think that the way things are positioned, particularly with this kind of left-right framing, we have this dialectic where people, I always kind of make the joke that the labels are really just like shiny wrappers for marketing to target audiences, because they've kind of lost their philosophical roots and true meaning. But people identify, right? They're like, I'm wearing team red, I'm wearing team blue. And so, of course, Vance is on team red right now. So they think of him as being a conservative. And a lot of the things that he is touting sound traditional, but he's a post-liberal, and he has openly said that he is a post-liberal. So this is very concerning, because post-liberalism is completely at odds with our with the metaphysics of our Declaration of Independence and with our Constitution. And so if a sitting vice president and potentially a candidate, I don't hold the crystal ball, so I can't predict the future, but it certainly looks like, with new books and the way they're positioning him, that's a possibility that we can't rule out. Then it's very concerning that his ideology is diametrically opposed to our founding political legal documents. So that being said, it was a very long-winded way of saying I'm really glad that you did cover this last night, and that you covered it from his book. I have not heard anybody else really addressing his recent book, Communion. And as you said, the worldview is incredibly important, because worldview shapes our metaphysics. This is something I talk about very often, is the metaphysics of the Declaration of Independence. We all know the preamble. We are all created equal, and all men are created equal, and we are endowed with certain unalienable rights, the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This is a very distinct metaphysical claim, and this shapes our entire legal system, our politics downstream, and it should shape and impact our education system. Unfortunately, it has not. We have been very much deracinated from those roots. However, Vance seems to have much in conflict with that in terms of, So,
well, in fact, he is a liberal. Okay, I just want everybody to know this guy is a snake, in my opinion, theologically, politically, economically. He is speaking, and I say snake. I'm comparing him really to the serpent in the garden with the way he's using the name of God, Christ, the terms Christianity. He uses Bible verses in this book multiple times. He's quoting the Bible. But he doesn't seem to know the difference between the second coming and the rapture, by the way, among many other things. And then he says at the end, the seventh to last paragraph is, we're really all part of the same church, whether it's Charlie Kirk or, Marxist Pope Francis, everybody, with his completely heretical worldview. Pope Francis, who's now passed away. But it doesn't really matter because at the end of the day, we're all part of the same church. That's what he openly states. So, the whole thing is, as I said on radio today, he's building a false church. Vance is building a religious structure, but also, I think, a false church, which in my view is described in Revelation chapter 17, verse 1 as the great harlot that sits on many waters. This is used by Antichrist and his 10 world assistants before, in that very chapter, they turn and destroy it. But he says on page 285, before I go to a clip of Vance, quote, as Christians, we are all together part of the same church. Those who suffered and those who prospered, those who voted for me and those who didn't, the living and the dead, my grandmother and my father, though they disliked each other, Charlie Kirk and Pope Francis, despite their different views, St. Augustine and Father Henry, me and my son, end quote. So everybody's part of the same church. That's ecumenicalism. He's building a false church, and he takes his frustration out on real conservative, dispensationalist, Bible-believing Christians. So that's really the work of an Antichrist spirit. Now, is he a leftist? Well, I don't have to tell you that. He told you that. Let me get some audio, boys.
I did this event at the Yale Federalist Society recently where they asked me for my 3 favorite Democrats purely in terms of policy outcomes. And I said, in order, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, and Tulsi Gabbard.
All right, you got to hear that again. Just make sure you heard it right.
I did this event at the Yale Federalist Society recently where they asked me for my 3 favorite Democrats purely in terms of policy outcomes. And I said, in order, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, and Tulsi Gabbard.
Well, there you go. Bernie Sanders.
Number one.
He likes their policy outcomes.
Yeah. So this is, we had talked a little bit off air, and I was saying that essentially what a lot of the post-liberals are doing, and I would put some of these disaffected kind of people in the same grouping, is that they support the social conservative policies, but they don't like the everything else is very much socialist. So socially, they consider themselves conservative, but I think they're much more aligned in terms of economic policy, political policy, with much of the left, very far left, like Bernie Sanders.
Mm-hmm. Now, he also, and I want to play it because I've played it before, and I'll play it again just to show you how radical this guy is. J.D. Vance, listen.
A lot of conservatives have said we should deconstruct the administrative state. We should basically eliminate the administrative state. And I'm sympathetic to that project. But another option is that we should just seize the administrative state for our own purposes.
Why don't we seize the assets of the Ford Foundation?
Harvard University endowment pays a 0% tax rate. Maybe it's time to tax that endowment, seize the endowment, actually penalize these endowments for being on the wrong side of some of these culture war issues. But
all right. And he goes on over and over. That's the key part. On why would you do it?
On the wrong side of some of these culture wars. We penalize these endowments for being on the wrong side of some of these culture war issues. But the basic idea here is the left sees an entity that's aligned with the right, the left punishes it. The right sees an entity that is aligned with the left, we run away. We refuse to do anything. That is what we have to stop. We have to be willing to actually fight these companies with fire.
I think the basic idea is that we have to seize the institutions and make them actually work for our people.
I tend to think that we should seize the institutions of the left and turn them against the left, right? We need like a de-Bathification program, but like a de-Wokeification program in the United States, right?
You know, he's full of it because he just sat there and told you he likes the policy outcomes of Bernie Sanders, that he wants to complain to you about the left. This guy is in my opinion, a fraud. He is a salesman pitching to you a fairy tale, and he's not a conservative at all. Courtenay?
I would agree he's not a conservative, and he, of his own admission, he has called himself a post-liberal. That is not a conservative. He is not aligned with the founding principles of the Declaration of Independence nor the Constitution. But I think what we need to recognize what he's doing there. So I had said how they're socially conservative, right? Socially traditional, and it's worth noting that he thanked in his book Chris Buzzkirk. Right. This is Rockbridge founding in 2019. Who was there? It was like Ahmad Malik and Rebecca Mercer.
Whoa. Slow down 1 minute. You just said who was there? Omid Malik. Where was he? Mm-hmm. Where was he?
This is 2019 Rockbridge. Rockbridge is a fund that was created by Chris Buzzkirk.
And who is that guy? Who is he?
He's with Claremont Institute, which is also worth noting because very much I would say that this is what we're seeing here is kind of a hybrid of Carl Schmitt, and Rene Girard, philosophically speaking. We're very much seeing an integration of those two ideas. And Claremont, it started I would say the marketing was that it was going to be aligned with the principles of the Declaration of Independence, which, of course, I'm incredibly passionate about. It has become kind of the inverse of that, unfortunately, and it is very Schmittian in the sense that they are advocating for something like a unbound executive, which is so there's a lot of concepts going on here.
A monarchy.
A monarchy would be an example of an unbound executive. Yes.
And you said Omid Malik is for this?
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know if he's for that philosophically speaking, but I know that he was there for the founding of Rockbridge.
And that was from last night. That's him, isn't it? In the teal tie?
Yeah. And then that's Don Jr., right?
It was actually held at his house.
It was held at his house. And this is what it was. Okay? Caroline and Omid Malik, along with Bettina and Donald Trump Jr., held this event for J.D. Vance. Okay?
And raised $5 million for him.
And they raised $5 million. The audience can hear you, right, Logan?
Uh-huh.
They raised $5 million for him. Let's see. Now, remember the connection between Malik and Tucker Carlson Network, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. He funded the Tucker Carlson Network. Yeah.
And he is a Muslim raised by Iranian and Pakistani parents, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So you guys getting the picture here?
Yeah. So we've got a lot of different ideas that are all antithetical to Constitution and I would say Christian principles as well. So when you hear him talking about we have to seize the institutions of the left, he's talking about Rockbridge and some of these, and like 1789 Capital, which I believe Donald Trump Jr. is also involved in.
Yes, that's what I read.
They're very much, against ESG, which of course I agree with. I'm against ESG too, but they're framing it in a like anti-woke, quote unquote.
And ESG is environmental, social, and governance.
Governance, yeah. So, they structure the way they market it. Again, the exoteric veneer is all about Gaia, right? We have to save the planet.
Mother Earth.
Mother Earth, exactly, the Gaia religion. But if you really look at the history of course, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, I would say it's much more about social impact financing, which really does end up being technocracy. And that's really where this is all headed. But that's the language they use for ESG. And of course, who has been one of the major proponents of advancing ESG has been, Larry Fink of BlackRock, right? But he's talking.
Who's now in charge of
the world. He's a co-chair of the World Economic Forum.
Right.
Yes. And so when you hear J.D. Vance talking about how we have to take over the institutions, he's framing it in the sense that the leftist institutions are woke. This is very similar to like what Curtis Yarvin says. And there's, of course, lots of ties between Yarvin and J.D. Vance, Peter Thiel. We outlined that quite extensively in our book with Patrick Wood, The Final Betrayal. I also documented it in my Phoenix Conspiracy article. And I talked about Chris Buskirk there as well. So that's what they're saying, but they're not. But this idea of taking over the institution, it's also very Schmittian, right? Because it's unbound executives should seize control, and that we have this friend-enemy distinction, right? The left are, it's like who wrote the book? Oh, it was Posobiec, Unhumans. They're unhuman. And he's also a post-liberal. So this is very much
Jack Posobiec.
Yes.
Yeah, don't trust that guy for 1 minute. Don't trust him for 1 minute. You know, Charlie Kirk was, if he had lived, he was going to have to make, I said on radio today, he was going to be at a crossroads real fast, because this book came out in June of this year. And if you read this claptrap, this is not consistent with what Charlie Kirk said he stood for when it came to traditional Bible-believing Christianity. So he claims he was going to, I guess I'm told, help his friend get elected president, J.D. Vance. But he was going to have to pretty quick make a decision that he's with the technocrats and the post-liberals or not. Do you think he would have come to this conclusion, or for pragma's sake and access gone along with it? I'm not trying to besmirch a dead man, but I'm just asking, what do you think he would have figured this out?
You know, I suspect he was pretty conflicted already. I mean, I think he was very immersed in that milieu. So I think he was already feeling kind of torn. You know, Turning Point was platforming a lot of these post-liberals. And I can't imagine, I don't want to speak for him. He's not here to defend himself, so I certainly don't want to, project onto him. But I would suspect that being surrounded and having platforms, so many of them, that he was feeling conflicted Yeah.
Well, let's go to my article, if you don't mind, because I asked you to read it.
Yeah. Yes.
Tell me, what was your takeaway from my article as I was trying to explain to people Peter Thiel, J.D. Vance, and their love of Rene Girard and the meaning of the cross, because this is central to this religious structure they're building. Both of these characters seem to really love talking about religion. I mean, Peter Thiel's running around holding exclusive events on the Antichrist, for Pete's sake. I think who's an open homosexual, is he not?
He is, yeah.
Okay. So
remember the whole Gawker magazine-ish scandal?
Oh, yeah.
Right?
With Hulk Hogan,
like he
with Hulk
funded
Hogan?
he funded the opposition, right? Because it was like revenge for exposing his boyfriend.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. I don't remember all the details of it, but yeah, essentially that was years later. But he has a no lose policy, so yeah, that's how he plays.
So how do you? For a long time. What did you make of my article, and why is this an important article?
So I think it's a very important article, particularly because, as you said, the worldview is obviously going to be very impacted by politics, right? So whoever is holding such a high position, especially somebody who, as we were saying with Schmidt, believes that they should hold the unbound executive, they essentially they don't believe in the checks and balances, right? They believe that for the sake of the greater good, we've heard them talking about this a lot, the common good, with this kind of utilitarian principle, that they should seize complete control. So it is really important to understand where he's coming from and what his philosophy is. And I think that one of the things that you touched on that's downstream from Girard is this really the idea of the institutions. And because so just for people, I think you've already expounded on this quite a bit in several of your shows, but just to recap, Girard believed in something called mimetic theory. So mimicry, like imitation. So essentially it's this idea that it really strips us of agency. We are not able to have any kind of individual desires. Our desires are just modeled after something else, right? You talked about his scapegoating concept, and this essentially becomes a mob kind of a concept. But this is where this is downstream from this idea that we model our desires. So our desires come from seeing somebody else. And then therefore the institutions essentially give us our desires. And this is, I think, really incredibly dangerous. And I think this is why this is incredibly important, what you're touching on in your article, because I just want to touch on what the political ramifications of this are. And this directly ties back to that clip that you played, or the several clips you played, of him talking about seizing the institution. Institutions are not there to give us or to, tell us what we should desire or tell us what is true. They are there to help create the formation of truth. The truth is something that is already objectively outside. And I think to some extent Vance does believe that. I don't know, I do think to some extent he says that. However, his actions kind of indicate otherwise, because they're saying that it is incumbent upon us to take complete control of these institutions and infiltrate, essentially do a reverse march through the institution, because people are not wired for their own truth. They are kind of blank slates, which is completely antithetical to the metaphysics of Christianity.
Let me just stop you right there, because what you're saying is man is a product of his environment, which is very much humanistic. Instead of saying man is a product of a fallen nature, original sin, Genesis 3, the garden, man is inherently evil. Solomon said, the heart is desperately wicked above all else. Who can know it? All have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. There's no one good, no, not one. So man has a sin problem. But secular humanists and humanists teach that man is really a product of his environment. So if he's
a blank slate.
And if the group is saying, as he does in this book over and over, I was trying to validate myself. I had to go to the right college, get the right degrees, get the right job, live in the right house, right neighborhood, have the right friends. I had to get elected. I had to do these things in order to be validated. And other people set objectives and goals, and they get on this treadmill of consumerism and materialism in order to validate themselves, because this is what the group has said is of value. And as a result, now we are sacrificing families, children, and religion on the altar of consumerism. That's what he says. That's what he's saying in this book. Okay. And the solution is, as he says in this book, the government has got to force institutions and the free market system to behave in a way that does not cause people to become victims of this consumerist, materialistic, capitalist system. Okay, so we have to pass laws that shut down businesses on Thanksgiving and holidays. He says that. We have to have maternity leave, and you can't make someone say no because it impacts the bottom line. Sorry. So we have to have the government forcing business to do things. He even says in here that one of the goals of the government is to create the ability for charity and generosity. No. That is not the function and purpose of the government.
No.
To make someone charitable or generous. So he is totally promoting that man is a product of his environment. The environment has been wrong. The environment has been polluted by materialism and capitalism. He quotes Pope Leo XIII, who says he criticizes capitalism, he criticizes communism, and I'm thinking, well, JD, what's the alternative? Well, we already know from him. It's the merger of the two, corporate fascism. Now the government is going to change the environment in order to produce the outcome we want, because man is a product of his environment. That's extremely humanistic.
Yeah. And it's also very conducive to technocracy, right? We are raw material that should be molded and constructed. So, the post-liberal and technocracy are not identical, obviously, but I would say one really does funnel into the other. The one is very convenient and conducive to the other. So he's very much advocating for this idea that we are raw material and we should be molded and shaped into what he envisions being the the best version.
This is so interesting, because if we must take the institutions, Antonio Gramsci, the Italian communist who influenced the Frankfurt School, came to America here in 1930s.
Yeah.
With this idea of the long march through the institutions. And he's saying we need to do the same. This is communism light. Okay. I'm sorry. This is communism light. And he's already told us that he likes the public policy outcomes of Bernie Sanders, among others. So, he's a liberal. You know where he's going. The question is, will you be fooled? Okay. Will you be fooled? Will you be involved in pragmatism, folks? Will you think, or will you be deceived? How many of you felt deceived by the GOP under the likes of George H. Bush, George W. Bush, okay? And afterwards, now you look back, you say, these guys were just selling me campaign slogans. They were using the war in Afghanistan, 9/11, for the military-industrial complex, for invading Iraq, for whatever reason. What's that all about? Why were we not going after Saudi Arabia? That's where the hijackers were from. Apparently, they were training on flight simulators in Iran. So why did we invade Iraq? Well, it was convenient for them because apparently they already had a plan written up before George W. even went into the office, according to numerous reports, some of these guys wanting to take Iraq. And of course, now you look what's going on in Iraq. It's being stabilized. You've got trade quarters being built. You got their leader now coming to the White House, who has a banker and business background, and he just signed $60 billion deal. They're removing Saddam Hussein, is trying to help stabilize that region. Now, from a biblical perspective, God allowed them to do what was in their heart, and it is laying the foundation, I believe, for a revived Roman Empire. There will be a Eurocentric world empire, I believe, based on Daniel 2, Daniel 7, Revelation 17 and 18, be there in that area of Iraq, and that old Babylonian empire, that rebuilding of a Babylonian empire that will be Eurocentric. So God allowed it. But how many of you looking back think, we got played? We got played, right? And how many young men and women went off to war thinking they were doing their patriotic duty and didn't come home? Your son or daughter or grandchild didn't come home, or nephew or niece, or they came home missing limbs, and now they're dependent on nonprofit organizations to build them homes that they can get into, whereas the government's busy sending billions of dollars to a bunch of terrorist organizations and countries and governments, for Pete's sake. How many of you are tired of being deceived? Well, here we are, Courtenay, trying to say again, do not be deceived. And what's the reaction? Most 99.9% is very positive. Others, good. I've seen a few. Logan, are you going to jump on here with me?
Yeah.
The response has been 99.9% positive on what we've been pointing out.
Yep.
But what have been the one or two comments you've seen that are showing that people want to be deceived and don't want to understand the truth? What's a recent comment?
I got to find it. Someone commented today. Let me see.
And the group basically told her to be quiet. But the point I'm making is what you and I are doing is trying to stop people from being deceived once again, right?
Yeah.
You can believe us now or believe us later, right, Courtenay?
Yeah, eventually, yeah. And I think more people are seeing it. I remember about a year ago when we started voicing concerns about J.D. Vance, a lot of people were not so kind, kind of mocking me, telling me that I didn't have any hope for the future of the country, and I was demoralizing and blackpilling. And, I said, no, I'm actually a very optimistic person. And what I want to do is empower people to exercise their agency. So, nothing is written in stone as of now. And I think that people should be aware of what is coming, if it is coming, or stop it if they have the power to do so, because then we'll be in a better position to protect ourselves and to, protect our free will. That's really what I think is at stake. So
this government seizing the institutions to control the mob and set the environment. How is that not trying to do the exact opposite of what he is speaking against? He's speaking against the mob mentality that's going this direction. So what he seems to want to do is seize everybody's stuff and create a new mob, because what if someone comes in and steals all your stuff because you don't agree with them on the culture war? Isn't that a mob? So he apparently is trying to create a mob mentality based on moral elitism, twisted scripture and Christian phrasing that somehow justifies a new mob mentality that comes in and strips the other people we disagree with from what they have. So isn't this, at the end of the day, a Hegelian dialectic of two mobs? He's bemoaning the mob mentality while he creates a mob mentality to go after the people he doesn't agree with for the outcome he desires.
Absolutely. And there's so many layers to this. So, one, this is actually very similar to what we've discussed many times with Russian active measures. Now, I have no evidence that he is being amplified or that this is an active measure, but I can see how it's conducive, right? Because they're doing something very similar where they're using the veneer of a Christian morality and moral superiority in order to seize a control of the government. And Vance is also, I think it's worth noting, he sits at this nexus where the overlapping of all of these groups that, what do they have in common? They're all advocating and advancing the negation of America 1.0. So these groups would be people like the post-liberals, which, I would say he's not actually a liberal. I'd say he's a leftist, more aligned fiscally, politically with the left, but socially, at least on the surface, advocates some more traditional values and anti-woke, which is ironic because wokeism is really Marxism with lines of intersectionality. And that's exactly what he is using. He is using Marxism with lines of intersectionality. So yes, it's very, very ironic.
He's a chameleon. He's a chameleon.
Yeah, I do think he's a chameleon, but he is this nexus point, right, with these, so the disaffected, which is kind of like that Tucker critical American theory, people who are just trying to negate America, essentially. Those are the real black pillars. Then he does also a very similar thing with this, I call it a sophisticated Jewish question, the target laundering. We've seen him do that. And then, of course, the Theo bros and the tech bros, and he's this nexus of all of those. But yes, what he's advocating for doing is very much a Hegelian dialectic. He wants to use do the long march through the institution for his purposes versus theirs. So it's just going to be a battle of who's in power, essentially. And all of it leads to the same place. Where does it lead? It leads to the erosion of the Constitution and the erosion of the metaphysics that has declared our rights unalienable.
So it leads to a bigger government that he believes needs to use the power of the government to strip people of their stuff, seize their stuff, create a new mob that targets those who disagree with them, which is the very definition of fascism, government fascism, corporate fascism, right?
Yeah, very much so.
Okay.
It's, and technocracy.
Pardon me?
And I would say he's aligned with technocracy.
Well, the technocrats, they could just turn you off, steal your digits. It's going to get pretty easy for them to do this.
Exactly.
Particularly when they tokenize everything, right? And by the way, I just saw an article today. I think it's over at worldviewreport.com, your daily aggregated news site. Speaking of tokenization, here we go. JP Morgan, Goldman, and 38 others test trading of tokenized assets across Wall Street. So this is coming with the tech bros. So pretty soon this idea is we'll just seize your stuff. It's just a matter of a few keystrokes and it's done, right?
Unfortunately, that's what it looks like. Yeah, looks like where it's headed if we don't stop it.
Now let's go back to the article I wrote that's at worldviewtimes.com because I wanted to go and find what were some of the most blatant, a real blatant quote by Rene Girard that would reveal what his real worldview is. And this was it. And I gave it on radio. Here you go, babe. Okay. My wife's bringing me water so I can take my protein tablets, so I can curb my appetite, so I can boost my muscle mass. So quick commercial here. Go to melissaprotein.com. melissaprotein.com. Here are my 5 protein tablets for now. Supposed to be taking 10 a day now, I guess. melissaprotein.com if you want to take your protein tablets, burn fat, maintain muscle mass, and decrease your appetite. That's 1 of 5. All right. Now, I went and found this quote. I have a lower third for that, by the way, Logan. melissaprotein.com.
I don't.
I don't.
I have to type it.
Okay. All right. Here's the quote by Gerard. He was being interviewed by Mark C. Sterling, Scandal, Scapegoats, and the Cross, an interview with Renee Girard. What does the cross teach us about the nature of God? Sterling asked. Girard, quote, it teaches that God has devised a way to save humankind by enlightening us. Okay, first of all, so how is salvation? By becoming enlightened. Okay, that's a false gospel. Yep. That's a false God, a false Christ, okay? So it teaches that God has devised a way to save humankind by enlightening us about our murderous nature. So you're enlightened by your nature, folks, and that's how you get saved. No, it's not. But he says, but God doesn't murder anyone. His son, God himself, accepts to be murdered for us, thereby to bring our nature to our conscious knowledge, end quote. Okay, so salvation is by being enlightened to your true nature, which is really this murderous nature of scapegoating, blaming innocent people for things of which they're innocent. Now, he uses Christ as an example of that, which is a problem because, as I write, the Bible does not say that Jesus died to make sinners conscious of their scapegoating. He died for sinners in their place, bearing what their sins deserved and accomplishing reconciliation through faith in Christ alone. 2 Corinthians 5:21 declares, he made him who knew no sin for us to be sin, that he made him who knew no sin to be sin for us, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. So I go on to lay out more, but the bottom line is these guys are redefining Jesus, redefining God, redefining the cross and the gospel. And I write that their Girardian framework changes the essential meaning of the cross when it replaces Christ's sin-bearing sacrifice with moral enlightenment about scapegoating. And now, sadly, most Christians in America that read this book would not find a problem with a lot of what's in here, nor would they find a problem with what I just read about Renee Girard. But this is at the root of what we're talking about, is theology. So at the end of the day, he is trying basically to say that we need to stop this scapegoating, this mob mentality, and we need to reorder society. And that's exactly what you hear in this book, a reordering of society. And if you don't get on the right side of it, we're going to seize your stuff. True or false?
Yes. And so I think this is where it's kind of like soteriologically Gnostic, not necessarily in the cosmology of Gnosticism, but, it's essentially saying that we're going to be saved through knowledge, through gnosis. And through the enlightenment, it implies that it's some sort of a secret knowledge that you have to be initiated into. And that's very much that I wanted to address that. That's what, when I read your article, that's what struck me, because that's very much what he seems to be framing. And that comes, that very much kind of highlights what J.D. Vance is talking about with the institutions, right? So the institutions become essentially like mystery schools for initiation into the knowledge that you could then become enlightened, and that will lead to your salvation, which is not what education is supposed to be for at all. That's kind of the inverse of what education is. And, if you, the education system is supposed to be predicated, at least in this country, on the notion, the biblical metaphysics that we are already, wired for truth, and that it's supposed to help us with the formation of truth, not to give us secret knowledge that will initiate us into our salvation.
It sounds to me, when I read this book, like he's saying the problem is capitalism. The problem is capitalism, i.e. materialism, i.e. greed, i.e. selfishness, i.e. we mimic that, we see that in others, and now we join the mob to say things are like this. This is the way things should be. Because we all have our values corrupted through this mob mentality. Government must come in and reorder the values of society and reorder society itself, which to me sounds very much like a communist value system that says really what the Frankfurt School said, the source of all suffering and oppression is Christianity and capitalism, right? The source of all suffering and oppression is Christianity and capitalism. What is he bemoaning here over and over? This current capitalist system, and he bemoans biblical Christianity, particularly those who are very conservative, Bible-believing, dispensationalist Christians. He sat there in a rage hearing about the second coming. Ooh, that's not a good sign spiritually. He mocks Christians, okay? So this book basically is saying the problem is Christianity and capitalism. And by Christianity, he means the fundamentalist, evangelicals, etc. And now he says, but let me tell you what Christianity really is. This is the real Christianity, and the Catholic Church will help you find your way to God. Don't mess around with these evangelicals that want to talk about the rapture, the second coming, creation versus evolution, be worried about things that it really was a family conflict, i.e. the euthanization of Terry Schiavo. Ignore those kind of evangelical Christians. They're the problem because they don't worry about drug addicts and the working class and the plight of the poor. They are self-absorbed in their pious little religious structure. So let me tell you what Christianity really is, which I found embodied, he says, in the Catholic Church and Pope Leo XIII, et cetera, et cetera. Bottom line, biblical Christianity and the free market system is the source of this mob mentality. That's what he's saying in here. And how is that not a communism light? Because now to fix it, we need bigger government to change everybody. If they don't want to change, we'll steal their stuff.
Yeah. Well, I mean, capitalism itself is kind of a Marxist framing, but he is very much subscribing to this.
Capitalism is a word, a pejorative by Karl Marx. So I'm going to, you're right. The free market system. Yeah. He is not for a free market system.
No, he's not.
He says so in his book.
Yeah, he's not. Yeah.
He doesn't say it per blank. But when you say we're going to use the power of the government to shut down businesses for the holidays we deem worthy, and by the way, he's being followed around by this Muslim dude, how many of those holidays are going to be Muslim holidays? When he says we're going to force businesses to pay for this healthcare, that healthcare, this thing, that thing, and we're going to use government to cause people to be able to be generous and charitable, then tell me you're for the free market system? No, you're not.
Oh, well, so before I address is this communism, I do want to just point out that the post-liberal framework is actually quite conducive to Sharia, right? Sharia is a top-down. I mean, there's no more unbound executive than Sharia law, and it is also very much. It's a top-down hierarchical structure, right? So this post-liberal unbound executive kind of philosophy, I'm not saying it is Islamic or Sharia, but I can see how one could funnel into the other and perhaps be a conduit to something like Chrislam, right? And I'm not saying that that's what they're doing, but I can see how it would be,
So this is how they can pal around with Malik, right?
Yeah, that was where I was going with that. But in terms of, is this essentially communism? I would say that or communism light. Yes, I very much think that for all the reasons you described, and I'll point out again how similar this is to what we see from people like Dugin and the Project Russia books that I've talked about. They wear the mask of this kind of very Christian veneer, this strong kind of patriarchal traditional order. And they use that to lure in because we've been so inverted, right? So they use that as a way to draw these people, to draw the public in. But what they're advocating for is completely antithetical to a truly, certainly to the Declaration and to the Constitution. It's antithetical to any true freedom, certainly to free markets, but to really even to have any of our individual freedom. They're saying that instead that all of the morality should be coming from a top-down hierarchical structure, as opposed to it coming bottom up from maybe parents teaching their children, maybe parents, inculcating the values and instilling the values that they would like to see carried out through their children and through their families. And that would have a ripple effect to their communities, to the religious institutions, right? It should be working that way, bottom up, laterally, as opposed to top down. And what they're arguing is that it has to be done from the top down. So, which is very much what communism or monarchy, or even some sort of a system that could be run by a technology.
It sounds like the old bourgeoisie, property owners, versus the workers, the proletariat in many regards.
Sure, yeah.
Which in the end, the workers don't get squat, by the way. Right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. Isn't that what they complained after the Bolshevik Revolution that it didn't spread throughout the West? I think this was Lenin's complaint, and of course Antonio Gramsci suggested we have to infiltrate through the culture, as long as people are culturally. And the problem, I think the biggest problem, the reason why he's appealing and why he's dangerous is because his diagnosis isn't entirely false. Right? There is some truth to a society that has become kind of more shallow, greedy, more materially oriented. I wouldn't deny those things, and that we are, there's the problems of feminism, which is Marxism, ironically. But these things diagnostically, I don't think are false. Where I differentiate from him is the solution. And I think that's a really big problem, because this is what you see with a lot of the disaffected and anti-establishment people as well. They point out all the problems, and the problems that they point out aren't all false. I don't agree with all of them, but diagnostically on the whole, I think they point out some things that are astute and accurate. But this is where when you're constantly in a state of critical theory, then you don't advocate what you're for. This is where things start tumbling down. This is Yuri Bezmenov's whole theory of color revolutions, right? You get the demoralization and the destabilization, leading up to the new normal, renormalization. And I think that's why we have an opportunity, I think, to advocate what we're for. And, certainly I think we need to, this is America 250. We should be advocating the principles that America was founded upon. And metaphysically speaking, yes, we have First Amendment, we have freedom of religion, you have freedom of conscience. However, metaphysically speaking, the Declaration of Independence codifies the metaphysics that are biblical. So there is a distinct creator-creation distinction. We do not author reality. It is inherited. We are not blank slates, right? We have a given nature, and we have a proper telos. These are things that we are for, and we are for realizing that telos, because we are wired for virtue. Of course, we will sin, we'll miss the mark, and, we'll fall short, but we are constantly striving towards that proper orientation towards virtue. And these are things I think that we should be advocating. We should be advocating teaching. And when you have something that you're fighting for, then it's much easier to resist some of this, what can be very appealing diagnostics.
Mm-hmm. The irony of this is it sounds very much like the Tavistock Institute. The Tavistock Institute promoted the idea of herd mentality, that they would take fear, they would cause fear, they would cause shock and awe. They would use a trauma response to get people to accept ideas they otherwise would never accept, so they could create the herd mentality. And this makes me really think about what these guys are doing. They're using the shock and awe of the current state of things,
right,
and using the shock and awe of the pending World War III, which in many regards I say has already started, the shock and awe of inflation, $40 trillion debt on record, not coming off record, debasement of the U.S. dollar, massive inflation, terrorism, all of these things the fight for the American dream, to be able to get a house, own a house, all of these things, right? The lack of ability for some to find a good paying job, to offset the cost of this education they've paid for, because again, they were told this is what you have to go do to be valued, right? How many people said, well, if when I'm 57, when I got out of high school in 88, everybody, that it was, you got to go to college. You got to go to college. I was like, screw that. And then I thought, after getting badgered by a few people, fine, I'll go take a couple of classes at the community college. Went and took up some business classes, and the moron teaching the business class had never run a business. I asked him, what company have you run? Have you ever run a business and made a payroll? No. I said, well, I own a commercial cleaning company, very successful one I've been building. I should be teaching this class over you. He didn't like that too much. I walked out of the class. I walked out of the class, never to return again. Right?
Wow.
Because I realized this is a fool's errand. Right? These ideas may work in your book, but they don't work in real life. And I'm certainly not going to be told how to run a business by a guy who's never run one when I was already running one. And it was a very successful commercial cleaning business. And I was only doing it until I could get my first book published and do all that kind of stuff. So
academic theory and practice are not the same.
No, but I had to push through a lot of peer pressure from adults and other people that I wasn't doing it the right way, that I wouldn't succeed, right? Because I wasn't doing it their way. So we have a lot of kids that have had that pressure put on them. They go get a degree. They come out with debt. Now they can't pay off the debt because they can't get a good job. And you have this natural crisis. Well, again, a lot of this is because these institutions and these clowns have told people this is the road to success. No, there's not a cookie cutter mentality here. We should have been doing the trades, and we should have been doing so much of the apprenticeships that this country was built upon anyway. I mean, that's what's going on in our control room over there with these guys. They learned on the job, and they're making more money than their average peer. And they didn't have to go get a degree to do it. They learned on the job. We job shadowed them. We taught them, right? But what I'm saying is there is all of this trauma that I've been describing, and it's rising with terrorism, the threat of terrorism. Now they're out today saying that we could have the power grid go down for 18 months, okay? The power grid could go down for 18 months. Here it is. Shocking, vulnerable U.S. power grid could result in 18-month nationwide blackout. Now, that's not new news. We've been talking about that for years here and in our documentaries and with the late Dr. Peter Pry. But they're all acting like this is new news. Well, it may be because Iran's threatening to take down the power grid. So the stories come back up because someone's out saying how easy it would actually be to do. All of this trauma now opens people up.
That's also kind of like future shock, right?
Yes.
Future shock, yeah.
So how is it not the same tactic of the brainwashing, the behavioral sciences of the Tavistock Institute that said we'll use social turbulence to create a herd mentality to get the group to go where we want to go, while they bemoan the idea of the group, and while they bemoan the idea of bullying and group consensus. That's exactly what they're building on the other side.
Yes. Yep. Wilford Bryan and Kurt Lewin. Okay. I think what's very interesting about this is that it's almost like you've got mimetic theory, which is Girard, which is kind of this it's the I don't know. It's targeting the doctrine, right? And then you have the mimetic warfare, which is, MEM versus MIM. And mimetic comes from the imitation, right? And mimetic is like a meme. And mimetic warfare is a form of warfare, strategic warfare. And that NATO actually put out a document on mimetic warfare. And this has become kind of the delivery system. And I wrote an article.
Okay, I'm going to stop you right there so the audience gets it. Girard teaches the idea of we mimic people. The reason we're in the problem we're in is we're all mimicking each other, and we're mimicking each other based on the wrong values. We're defining success and fulfillment by the wrong values. We have to mimic each other. And then when we don't get what we want, we bully people we create violence, et cetera, et cetera. So it's the mimicking idea. That's different from this other, what you're describing. What is
mimetic.
It called? Mimetic.
Mimetic.
And
so it's MEMI.
And describe
mimetic.
what that is.
So people might be familiar with memes, right? A meme is like you have an image that kind of captures an idea and it proliferates. So it creates the ideology of an organism. And it's through this, it could be a tagline, a slogan, it could be a picture, but you see this on social media all the time. And mimetic warfare is a way of using essentially the soundbite, weaponizing sound bites. And
sloganeering.
Sloganeering, yes.
Which the Tavistock was into that.
Yes, so that's why I brought it up, and I'll circle back to how it's like Tavistock. But I think this is exactly what we're seeing right here, and like I said, they have done doctrines on mimetic warfare. This is an actual political warfare doctrine, and so that becomes the delivery system, whereas the mimetic is kind of the targeting the doctrine, right?
Okay, so in other words, one is the ideology, the other is the delivery system.
Yes. And I think so. Remember, I had written the article on the algorithmic oracle, and I talked about how essentially what we're seeing is this iteration of the sensitivity training, which is just what you described. This Kurt Lewin combining with the topological theory of social, and then combining it with Trist and Bion and this social turbulence kind of theory. Emery, I think Emery was the one who specialized in the social turbulence, but it's kind of that combination where we get this sensitivity training is essentially brainwashing. We have, for the sake of time, I'll just tell you that the CIA actually posted a document in 1974, you can get this on CIA.gov, where they say that they wanted to test the efficacy of sensitivity training, but that it was too similar to Chinese brainwashing. They don't say Maoist struggle sessions, but I think that's what they were alluding to. And they can't brainwash their military, so we will never know the efficacy of sensitivity training. But it is essentially brainwashing. But it is this idea that you have these change agents that come in and they shape, they peer pressure the group. Right. So and everybody ends up adopting the same kind of ideology. And the Tavistock Institute, as you said, they were masters of sloganeering. The entire organizational psychology, industrial psychology field, the whole field of human relations and human resources. Human Relations was their journal, but the human resources comes out of Tavistock. And so it's a culture of the workplace, right? This all comes out of Tavistock and propaganda. So when you talk about the trauma, which is what I was saying with all of this critical theory, I don't know what else to call it. That's essentially what it is. But when you keep pointing out all of the potential catastrophe, the apocalyptic state that is looming, right? Isn't that Peter Thiel's entire theory of the Antichrist is essentially this apocalypse that's that's going to become the tyrannical one world government. And he has this theory of the ketechon, which is it's like a Greek term for the restrainer. And so essentially, that's why it's okay for, we need to have the restrainer in order to prevent this tyrannical one world government. That's not what the Antichrist is at all. But, this idea of apocalypse and all this constant doom, blackpilling does create a sense of demoralization, and it is a form of trauma. And I think that there's now suggesting their solution, right? We become much more susceptible to being steered when we're under this kind of stress state and traumatic induction, which is what Tavistock studied, and that is what they showed. And I think that that's very much what we're seeing now. And of course, Tavistock, it's an institute of psychology, right? The whole field of psychology is essentially predicated on this notion that we do not have an inherent fixed nature. We are not endowed with souls, that we are essentially blank slates that can be molded. And it becomes very much self-apotheotic, right? And so man becomes the constructor, man becomes the creator who can mold into whatever they deem is, in this case, the most moral version of man. And so they will create the institutions that will then shape the people. But that's an inversion. It's all very much an inversion. But yes, I think this is it's very similar to what Tavistock was doing. So.
Which makes me wonder.
I just brought up a lot of things, so we can pull on any of those. Sorry.
Yeah, that's all right.
I was trying to do it very succinctly, but it was not that succinct because there was a lot of different ideas, but I think they all tie together.
Absolutely. No problem. So which makes me wonder if J.D. Vance has been influenced by the Jesuits, because the terminology social justice actually comes from a Jesuit. Luigi Tapernelli coined the phrase social justice, a Jesuit. The father of the New Age movement is a Jesuit priest, Teilhard de Chardin.
Yeah. The noosphere.
The idea of preterism was created largely and pushed by a Jesuit. And I could go on and on. I have a whole chapter in one of my books on the influence of the Jesuits. But he was supposedly greatly influenced by the Dominican friars.
Yes, Dominican, which I don't know that they are Jesuit, but I think the Dominican for sure.
Yes. And I actually just asked Yahoo about it. Now, I'm just going to tell you what Yahoo even just said. Here's what Yahoo just said.
Oh, okay. Hear you.
Okay. Yahoo just said, J.D. Vance's relationship with Jesuits has been significant, particularly in his conversion to Catholicism, which was influenced by the Dominican friars. And he goes on to talk about his influence of Rene Girard. So, and then it points you to an article by the Jesuits of Ireland on him. So I'm just telling you, I see some Jesuitical things going on here with this guy. You want to comment?
Yeah. So I can't, confirm. I don't have any evidence beyond this. But there are a couple of things that are interesting. So I know Peter Thiel was very good friends with Father Palma Arna, who was of Opus Dei. And they had a very close relationship, I think kind of an intellectual, spiritual kind of mentorship. So that's another connection, obviously, Peter Thiel, J.D. Vance. And then I would say that you had brought up Tavistock, and this whole kind of trauma-based mind control and splitting, essentially, is a part of the psychological theory. And this does seem to be, at least from the writings of Adam Weishaupt, who was the founder of the Bavarian Illuminati. He talked about how he modeled the Bavarian Illuminati off of the Jesuit infrastructure. And I've heard people say that the CIA was as well. I don't know that for sure. But
the CIA was modeled after the Jesuits. Absolutely.
So definitely, Adam Weishaupt talks about that with the Illuminati, and he talks about the hierarchical structure that came from the Jesuit model. He talks about secrecy having been something that he learned from the Jesuits, because it was a very good tool for initiation, because people would feel a sense of clout. And that they would take on the honor and the responsibility, so they would be bought in, right? It was a way of not quite bribing, but an attachment kind and loyalty, creating loyalty, and so these things are certainly parts of initiation rituals, and just the structure itself, right? And those things are very much tied to trauma. A lot of times in those types of, a more colloquial kind of example would be like Greek fraternities, right? Most people have heard of hazing. That's part of your initiation. But sometimes the hazing can be a little traumatic. They might embarrass you, do things that might create a sense of distress. And trauma is different for different people, but it could be traumatic. But when people are traumatized, it creates a sense of, one, they're more susceptible, right? They're more moldable. They're more, they're easier to steer and to control. And two, it also creates a sense of loyalty. So it's part of what's called trauma bonding. And this is part of what they do with sensitivity training as well, is trauma bonding. So I don't know. The tactics are definitely similar to things that I have read, but I can't prove the lineage.
Well, here is the here is, hit the wrong button. Here is the paper by Pope Leo the 13th. Okay. And this was back, I think this was back in the late 1800s that he wrote this. And this is basically the Pope's treatment of capitalism and communism, and how we need to, deal with both. 1891, I think it was. And this is what he writes. J.D. Vance, he quotes this. The Pope also lays out a vision of society where the state protects the vulnerable, guarantees a just wage for laborers. What's a just wage? I said that again last night. And ensures the working people have sufficient rest from labor, not for vigorous indulgence, but so they can focus on higher matters such as their religious and familial obligations. So this is what he's using the government to force corporations to pay a living wage. No wonder J.D. Vance likes Bernie Sanders' public policy outcomes.
Well, and not only that, but, I had written a whole series on Musk's UHI, the universal higher income that he's proposing. And I ended it with the technocratic creed, which is the Praxis kind of declaration, Alex Karp's Praxis declaration. But one of the articles was on stewardship. And I think it was one of the least acknowledged of the series. And I think it's because people aren't taught stewardship. And I would think this should be, integral to Christian teaching. So I was kind of surprised that so many people really just didn't seem to wrap their head around what it was I was trying to convey. But I think this is what is lost. And there's so much focus on the government should take care of everybody. The government should pay, and it becomes all transactional. So not only is the government now, our parents, but our religious leaders, it becomes all consuming. It's everything. It's our sole controller, essentially. But it is also replacing our capacity for stewardship. I think that that's something that is very much lost in society, and it is something that is part of why people aren't even able to really clearly put their finger on how wrong all of this is, because that concept has been completely lost. But I'm not saying that we don't, there shouldn't be some sort of a fiscal self-sufficiency and people should be able to make a living and, all of that. I understand the practical matters of that. I'm not denying it. However, there is a sense of when I think the best example of this would be a farm, right? If you have a farm and you have dominion over the farm, you literally reap the rewards of your labor, right? So that's what creates the yield. It's you're tending to the animals, you're tending to the crops, which then yields something that you either can use or you can trade for, right? It becomes something of value. But this is all out of stewardship. It's this idea that we have a responsibility, a duty, and that we value, we tend to the things that we value. Now, it completely eradicates all of that. It's just that we should just be given, certain value, monetary value that they're going to decide. How do we decide what value? And are we all going to get the same value? How does this actually work in practice, or even really fundamentally? If we take in the spiritual component, it doesn't make any sense. And if he's claiming that he's a Christian, this is fundamentally antithetical, I would say, to the biblical metaphysical framework.
Courtenay Turner, CourtenayTurner.com, CourtenayTurner.com, author of the book, co-author of The Final Betrayal. And you have another book too, right? Do you not?
I am working on several, but I don't have them out yet.
But they can get that. Where can they get that book right there?
So it is on Amazon. We have several. We have the paperback, we have the Kindle and the audio, and that is at Amazon. You can also go to technocracy.news, and if you get more than one copy, you'll get a discount there. And it's also on books.by/Patrick Wood. And I have it at my Courtenay.show. It's there as well.
So Courtenay, this is a very important topic, and I guess this is what separates us from traditional talk radio, talk TV. Because most talk show hosts like Sean Hannity and Mark Levin and all these other guys, they may cover some stuff that I agree with and is interesting. But none of these people are going to go deep like this. And here's the reason why. Most people don't want to know this much. Most people do not want to know this much truth, right? And so as a result, you end up with a population that sees the bits and pieces, as Francis Schaeffer said, but not the big picture. And people have often said, some people, other broadcasters, people who run other organizations, have been shocked at the depth of our programming and that people will watch it. And I said, well, the problem is you guys are going for a big audience. I'm not going for a big audience. I'm not interested in numbers. I'm interested in training and educating people. And by that very nature, my numbers are not going to be as big as others. But that also means my audience tends to be way more affluent than your audience. And I know that to be true because I have a foundation and I know what people give. And we have gold sales and I know how much gold these people buy and silver and what they with IRA. And we have a very, very affluent audience. Not everybody, but there's a big percentage of our audience that's extremely affluent. Why is that? Educated people tend to be affluent people because they're disciplined, they get educated, whether that's self-education or formal education. Many of them are, by the way, self-educated. Many of them are farmers and ranchers, and many of them are in the service-oriented business, by the way. And so I said,
they understand stewardship.
They understand stewardship. That's right. And so I said to my wife years and years ago, we're not going to measure success by numbers because by the very nature of what we do, we are not going to be attracting the big numbers because we're not going to be an inch deep and a mile wide to attract that big of an audience. We're after not quantity, but quality. And as a result, we have an audience that's very informed, very engaged, very discerning, very educated, and in many cases, very influential, which means they are not only, many of them, financially well off, but as I said, they're influential, okay? Because they own businesses, because they do have a checkbook, and they can support churches or not support churches, or support candidates and not support candidates. They are able to be a leader in their community because people look up to them for what they've accomplished and people want their support. And sometimes they will write a check to that church and then I get emails, we're done. We're not giving any more money to this church of ours because they're promoting the very things that you're talking about that we're against. We even have some of the folks that have left part of their estate to our foundation who are not leaving it to their children because their children are full-on socialists. They're like, we're not leaving them our income to go around and promote the very things we have fought our whole life against. So what I'm saying is this program is different by nature. But this, if J.D. Vance and these people want to talk what's wrong with the country, what's wrong with the country is we don't have enough knowledge, enough wisdom, right? And talk radio and talk TV caters to an inch deep and a mile wide. And so we end up having the GOP running on slogans, not because we understand ideas, worldviews, philosophies, and can debate and contend for truth, because it's running on manipulation and slogans and felt needs and manipulated messaging that in many regards is a lie.
Yeah, and I just want to add to when you're saying a lot of people don't want to know this much truth, and I think the problem is that people tend to they think it's scary, right? Mm-hmm. But the whole purpose of the knowledge is to instill agency. It is not to quote unquote black pill people. That's not the purpose of it. There may be some things that are uncomfortable. Sometimes truth is not warm fuzzy. Yep. But really, if you have the knowledge, then you are empowered. You can prepare yourself. You can make changes where you think there'll be, where they'll have efficacy, there's a lot of power in that. So I think sometimes because some of the topics sound dark, people will leap and say, oh, you're just blackpilling and demoralizing. And it's easy when you just take a sliver. People can focus on that. But when you're talking a big, broad, philosophical and theological, very foundational kinds of concepts, it gets overwhelming for some people. But the purpose of it is not at all, it's actually the opposite of demoralizing. It's the opposite of trying to scare people. Fear is incredibly powerful. Fear sells, it's marketable, it makes people feel like they're in the know, and they can, it's a great way to organize cliques. But agency, it strips people of completely. And I think that what you're doing here is the opposite of that. This is really to empower people. And it's going to look very different for different people. Everybody has different unique gifts, strengths, and talents, and different resources, right? So as you said, some of your audience is very affluential. Some of them are very influential. Some of them, have different positions in their communities, their families, and whatnot. And so using their skills, their talents, and their resources, they can have tremendous impact. And it's going to be completely different for each person. But this knowledge should empower them to figure out where their role lies and to take action.
Well, you help us to do it. You help us to do that, Courtenay. We sure appreciate you.
Thank you. Likewise.
And we're going to be carrying your program now on a regular basis, right?
Yes, I will be starting back up in October, probably the end of October. And we're
also talking about you and Patrick and Carl Tykreb all in studio at this desk for a special symposium for Vault members coming in November.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
We are as well. Thank you, Courtenay.
Thank you.
CourtenayTurner.com. Folks, appreciate what we're doing here. Again, we put a lot of time and effort into study, research, and to bring you programs like this. But to push it all out for free is not free to us. Our bandwidth bill is about $10,000 or so a month, not counting all the other IT expenses. We got to bring in around $40,000 a month to cover all of our insurance, bills, utility, IT, bandwidth streaming, licensing that we have to do for all the software, paying the guys in the control room. I could go on and on. We have to have your support. If you appreciate the fact we push this out for free, where we could put it all immediately behind a paywall. Not only do we push it out for free, but this will go up online for you to watch again tomorrow and share with family and friends. So we need your support. Will you help support our broadcast ministry, news, information, education? We appreciate your support. We need your support. Worldviewfoundation.com, worldviewfoundation.com. You also find our mailing address there if you prefer to support us through the mail. We still have up yet tonight more to come, so don't go away. We'll be right back after this break.
No signal, no service, no way to reach the people you love. When disaster strikes, hurricanes, wildfires, grid failures, civil unrest, the first thing to go is communication. Cell towers fail, networks crash, and suddenly, you're cut off. Not anymore. Worldview Talk brings you military-grade satellite phones that work anywhere on Earth. Mountaintops, deep wilderness, disaster zones, no cell tower required. When everyone else goes silent, you stay connected. And that's just the beginning. At worldviewtalk.com, you'll find everything you need to protect what matters most. Solar generators, silent, clean power when the grid goes down, bulletproof backpacks, everyday protection for your kids, your commute, your peace of mind. Faraday bags shield your devices from EMPs, hackers, and tracking. This isn't paranoia, it's preparation. And in today's world, it's smart. Visit worldviewtalk.com. That's worldviewtalk.com. Don't wait until the lights go out. Worldview Talk. Stay connected, stay protected, stay ready.
All right, guys, welcome back from the break. I recorded an interview yesterday with Michael Weiner on what's going on with the bond market. what Bassett is trying to accomplish. It's not working. What this really means, buying our own debt, how well is that going to work out, folks? That indeed we are headed to life-altering inflation, okay? So I recorded this with Mike Weiner yesterday. And then I want to go to an interview I also recorded yesterday with Todd Bensman. We talk about many things, including the topic of drones and drone swarms and many other things with Todd Bensman. But first, here's Michael Weiner on the bond market. We're buying our debt, and we are headed toward life-altering inflation. Watch this. Join me now is Michael Weiner to describe to us what happened today. I addressed it in my Worldview Report tonight, here in my commentary. Michael, this was a big deal, what happened today. We're buying more debt. We're into quantitative easing light, as Zero Hedge calls it. We're expanding the balance sheet. We're reshuffling the money around. Bottom line is, though, inflation incoming. And as I've been saying this week, I believe we are headed to life-altering inflation for many Americans. The question is, will they hear us now or hear us later? Will they protect themselves or be punished? Because that's what's happening. As John Maynard Keynes said, the Keynesian economist, Marxist, Fabian socialist, and there's really not a whole lot of difference between Fabian socialism and Marxism other than words. He said, we can steal the majority of the people's wealth through a continuous process of inflation, and not one man in a million will know what we're doing. Well, we do. The question is whether people will do anything about it. But today was a historic day. It's a big move that was made by the feds. Give us your analysis, explain it in layman terms, and tell us what you think's coming.
Well, first of all, the situation with the inflation, we inherited, as Trump said, he did inherit tremendously bad debt and tremendously bad inflation, but they just increased it. Now, when you're talking about inflation, they did not increase it. They did a good job initially of fighting it back. They never purported it and said it right on Biden's days. They always underplayed it and underwrote it and never told us the true amount of inflation that there really was, and including Jerome Powell, that nincompoop who's now sitting still on the Federal Reserve, who literally fed the fire of this whole disaster. What really is pathetic is the fact that I believe that the only solution that Warsk is going to be forced into is raising interest rates, which doesn't help the housing market. As you might know, in Memphis and other parts of the country, this interest rate situation literally closed down a lot of people. Mortgage rates went up, and people that were buying houses canceled out, because what they thought their payment was going to be went up significantly. And that's a detrimental effect on us. The dollar, the U.S. dollar, as I said, and we warned them first on Worldview, and as I said, we are going to have a weakening dollar to a point of no return, and they'll use that as a means of leading us into the new digital financial world. This is all part of the shell game. As I said, I'm writing a book on. This is the shell game running on right now. And we will be paying the consequences on the currencies, because the currency's values are going to be going down. And the only way that they'll be dealing with it is raising the interest rates. The bond market is getting very aggressive, which is not good. And then we look at the situation of gold, which gold is doing exactly as I said when we had that show weeks ago, when all of the geniuses who are now stating gold's going to 10,000, 5 weeks ago, they were saying it's going to 33,000. And I said, no, it's going back. My predictions still stay solid. I've never changed them. I will say right now that what Warsk is talking about, the Federal Reserve, is a statement on a problem, and it goes into the fact of the now, and as I say, I'm a Trump supporter, but I used to be 100%, now I'm 80. I don't like his position on digital. I don't like his position whatsoever on digital. I think it's counterproductive, and I think it's self-serving in a lot of ways with his family's position on that. And I am not pleased, as many people that I talk to from Worldview and other people are saying, that they don't like the fact of him not ending this situation in Iran. What is the best thing to do? And the game that they have been playing of thinking that, well, I'm going to play into the fact of the Saudis and the Omans and the Kuwaitis, let's not hurt them so bad. Well, you don't get into a war not to finish it. America likes winners. Simple. They liked Eisenhower. They like Bradley. They like Patton. They like John F. Kennedy. They like Reagan. They like winners. They don't like losers. And right now, we're getting a lot of double talk, and it's not fun. All they need to do, you want to end it? This is just a non-professional in that area. It's very simple. Blow up all their money. Destroy everything they have financially, which is take out Carg Island. You don't have to send troops, just blow it down. Don't blow up all their refineries and blow up all their installations along the Strait of Hormuz, and it's over. Then we walk away and say we won, because they're going to be fighting between each other just to exist. They won't have any source of money coming in. But we're not getting that. And that's feeding to this inflation situation and the oil prices. So the horizon we're not going to get the true story. And the situation out of the Federal Reserve and what happened today of the announcement of the $40 trillion threshold for the first time in history, there's no solution. And again, Trump doubled down today on a statement I said 6 weeks ago, which slid right by everybody. And that was, we are going to sit back and have a situation of the government turning around and going digital. His solution is cryptos, as he said, which is counterproductive to the people who have money, who have been good citizens, who have saved productively and legitimately are being punished. And then we have the other situation that's scaring the market and starting to, of this socialist thing. And I was just talking to a gentleman just minutes ago in Minnesota, Worldview Weekend person, owns a nice company there, is totally disgusted of what's going on in his state. It's absolutely a horrific situation if you're in the Minneapolis-St. Paul metropolitan area to what has been going on there to not only successful business people, but the economy. So, Brandon, I don't see anything except a need for people to step up and protect themselves. The first thing they're going to start doing is stopping your ability to move your money. We talk about moving money and buying gold and protecting your IRAs. They can stop your ability to transfer your IRA with a snap of their finger. No more transfers. That's all they got to say. No more. And you're done. You're stuck wherever you're at.
Now,
that's not going to be the first thing that happens out of this mess.
Now, as I said in the Worldview Report tonight, Deutsche Bank's warning that if the price of Treasury bonds is not allowed to fall to where the market says it should fall, then the adjustment is going to happen elsewhere, and that's going to happen in the currency. And the dollar is going to be what takes the hit.
Correct. And they're not adjusting it. They're not adjusting the bonds. They're not doing it. The Treasury is not doing it. And what's disturbing is they're talking about doing it, and they're not. The bond market is getting very aggressive, and the bond market being aggressive is also a negative on the other end of the market. And, you know, the worst time of the old worst stories about the stock market is October. October is a death month in the market. And boy, oh boy, this one's going to be real interesting. And don't expect any of these interesting guys and gals on these beautiful networks who get up every morning and give us, oh, how great it is. And I listen to these guys and I just smile, because as we did when we turned on and did some of the shows in the past of 2008 and asking why these people didn't tell the truth back then, and they have no excuse. Their answer is very simple. If they told you the truth, you would sell out of the market, and they don't want you out of the market because they need you in it to do what? Make money. That's why.
Mm-hmm. So the world is really basically being asked to lend more money to this country in the 30-year market, but they're not wanting to do so at the current interest rates, correct?
Not only are they not wanting to do it, It's almost like a guy in an ice cream store and an Eskimo and selling ice cream to an Eskimo in Alaska. Nobody wants to buy it. I mean, they can sit and run around and talk about it. Japan is not being stupid anymore. They don't want it. The European Union, who won't even support us in the Straits of Hormuz, they don't want it. The British don't want it. The Australians don't want it. They might jam some of it into Taiwan because Taiwan wants our help. South Korea has been stabbing us in the back. So reality being what it is, as Trump said, we are going to buy it. It's called going digital. They will mess with the money, and they're not messing with what's going on, and they're not dealing with anything with the bond market the way they should. And that in and of itself is going to create weakness all around the board. And it's going to be a stepping stone to the creation of a new currency and a new financial world. And they're going to tell us how wonderful it is. And if people are going to sit back like these people who buy and put millions in retirement dollars with various different things, and then the reality is they have no clue of what they've done other than what some genius has told them of you're going to make X amount of interest on it. They've never read the fine print. They don't know what it is. So reality is those people will have a wake-up call, because by the time they can figure out what they have in this new currency, which is going to be 3 to 4 different ways between the coin-based banking system of the reward banking system to the digital banking system to the crypto system to the stable coin system. And guess what? Out of all of this, Brandon, we talked about it in another show. They stated that the Federal Reserve cannot be involved with digital currencies. So who does that leave involved with the staple coins and the rest? The U.S. Treasury, and the U.S. Treasury will call the shots on the new currency without the Federal Reserve, which is really scary. Now, I'm not a lover of the Federal Reserve, but it's called checks and balances. And they gives them a bigger chance even to jam us. So it's a double-barrel shotgun. They're going to be shooting us in the knee, and the other people are going to be shooting us in the gut. So we're not going to be able to stand, and we're not going to be able to eat. And simply put.
So when you have tech companies that are offering bigger returns, this also now has got the government competing with the big tech firms and their artificial intelligence build-outs for those dollars, correct?
Yeah, they're not building out of their profits. They're selling debt. And, people are thinking to themselves, would I like to buy debt with a company like Google? Or do I want to buy debt with a company like the United States?
They got better credit ratings than the United States government.
Oh, not only that, or Meta, or IBM, or any of these other companies, simply because of the fact that our credit rating is a 600 score, not an 800 score, and people look at the mismanagement of money. In deference to Google, they're financially running as a business. The United States is running as a charity, and we're the contributors, and they're a charity handing it out everywhere with no controls. We still have not got into the biggest black hole, bigger than all the trillions of dollars of fraud here, is the foreign aid market. They don't even want to talk about it. They have no desire to bring it up because that is a bigger black hole of theft, robbery, and fraud than even what goes on with the Somalians who come here, get off a plane, smile for a couple hours, and go up and steal a couple billion, and then live in a mansion. It's amazing.
Yeah, indeed it is. Let me look up something here. I was looking up something. So, what this really comes down to, Michael, as I put in my worldview report tonight, is that the U.S. government, who is the seller of the bonds,
yes,
is now become the buyer of the bonds.
Correct.
So we're buying our own debt. I want to make sure the lay people, we put this in layman terms. Our government is turning around and buying our own debt, our own bonds, because nobody else wants them.
Well, you know, you ever heard of the two-headed horse, or how about the movie The Multiplicity? I mean, they're gonna. It's a shell game. It's like the book I'm writing. They're gonna pretend that one thing is moving in another direction and pick it up, and then find out that each shell has a peanut underneath it. They put one out there, but actually all three have a peanut underneath it, so they actually let you think you're winning. They're selling us our own debt. We're financing it. They're going to take it out of various forms of money that we pay in, and then they're ultimately going to take it out of our money in the bank, our money in our retirement plans, our money, especially your retirement plan. Says, boy, oh boy, there's a trough of money. Could you imagine if they nationalized the retirement plans and grab up 30 to 50 trillion dollars or more? All of a sudden they say, we're out of debt. No, we're not. They owe us, but what they've done is replaced the hard dollars that we control, that we can leave to our children, that we can leave to our wife or husband, that we can leave to our church or wherever else we choose. And now it's in our Social Security account. And we know the wonderful thing about Social Security, they hope you die. Okay? That's what they want. I mean, that's like Zeke Emanuel said when they did Obamacare. You don't have to live beyond 75. So, you know, my answer to him is you first. But the reality is I'm no longer concerned about saying protect your grandchildren. You better protect yourself. For you people that have retired, you're 65, 68, 75, 82, 84, and you're living and you're in good health. Do you want to find out you don't have money to maintain the lifestyle you've been living that you've been responsible for? That's exactly what they're looking to attack right now. And that's exactly what we can help you with by protecting your retirement dollars. That's why Reagan did it. That's why Reagan created it. He created it because he knew that this was going to happen. He foresaw it. And that's exactly what we're living with now. So forget about your bank accounts. The first thing they're going to go after is where your retirement dollar is. Then they'll go after your currency. And then after that, it's going to be too late.
So in other words, is that moonshine or water?
That's smart water. I want to be smart. That's what Dolly and I drink smart water every day. She drinks some every day.
So well, she finally got her bed back. She got chased out of her bed by Logan's dog, Jerry. So she's got her bed back. I don't know. Jerry's around here somewhere. There's Jerry. You worried about Jerry pooping on the floor, Logan? Or eating wires back there? So Logan's coming to rescue Jerry. Go by, Jerry. There goes Jerry. All right. So, Michael, basically what we got going on here, correct me if I'm wrong, I said it in my worldview report tonight, is that you've got the government swapping 30-year obligations for short-term paper that has to be rolled over again and again and again. In other words, it's refinancing the national debt credit card at a moment the interest rate is climbing and then calling it some kind of liquidity support. Is that right?
Exactly. And you can't, I love these names they come up with, liquidity support.
Quantitative easing.
Quantitative easing. And when, you know, you're sitting there for a guy comes home, works all day. He could be a fireman. He could be a contractor. He could be an electrician. He could be a doctor. And he comes home, sits down, grabs a beer, turns on the TV, and here's quantitative easing and liquid this. And you see, what the heck are they doing? What they're doing is creating a fake out. They're sending you one way and they're going another. And we are the victims. We keep warning about this. We have foretold about this a year ago, 6 months ago, 6 weeks ago. We told you this was going to happen. I said on the show that the closer we get to September 30th and they have to deal with this debt, they're going to start moving things around and creating games to fool us on how they're going to deal with this. And ultimately, the payoff at the end of all of it, and we talked about the date in January, Brandon, when all this is going to come to a head, understand the fact that at the end of the day, they will say, we're going to solve it. You're going to have new money. And you'll have a tokenized situation, you'll have a crypto situation, you'll have a stable coin situation. And all of a sudden you sit there, wait a minute, I own stable coin, I own tokens of Ford Motor Company. I thought I owned stock in Ford Motor. Wait a minute, I've got crypto and wait a minute, I got stable coins in my bank account, and the bank's calling what they're issuing. And all of a sudden you think, well, God, it looks like a lot more, I guess. And then when you run the numbers, guess what? You just lost 35% of what you had in value, in buying power. And they sucked it all up to deal with this debt rather than starting to be financially responsible. Look, if I ran my own business for 23 years, when business is bad, I cut my salary. And if I had to let people go, I let them go. I was responsible. In order to keep the company going, you have to do that. As a company, as the United States of America, why aren't we doing that? We started doing it with Doge, and then we threatened to destroy Elon Musk for trying to do the right thing. It's too late now. This administration has pretty much embraced the shell game, which started back in the turn of the century, in the 1900s, not the turn of the 20th century, right at the beginning of the Federal Reserve. And boy, it's just moved forward since then, and here we are.
So where do you see this ending? Do you agree with me that we're going to have life-altering inflation?
I think there's going to be inflation, but I think that the big thing is going to be life-altering finances and money. And I don't think you really understand what you have until the middle part of next year. And when you do, I think there's going to be a lot of shock and awe. What scares me is no matter how bad you might say you think the Republicans are doing, the Democrats, socialists, communists are 1,000 times worse. And these people are sitting back and playing into that by saying you were going to give you everything for free. And they're just communists, and we got to fight against that. But I don't see a solution in the future other than financial responsibility, other than shutting down some of these things, other than the stock market reflecting true values. So maybe some of the money that's in the stock market can go on other ends of the federal government to help it and also pay people the money rather than pay these companies the money. But it's going to be a horrific period of time, and don't expect any forewarning from the government. And they're just going to play a shell game, and don't project any forewarning from your financial person. As I've said 100 times, they keep saying low risk, medium risk, and high risk. But when the markets collapse, everybody loses the same. It's amazing. Why?
So you are agreeing with me that life-altering inflation is coming, if not already here, but it's going to become major league life-altering inflation. Debasement of the dollar.
Debasement of the dollar is a form of inflation.
Exactly.
Correct.
So you're agreeing with my statement?
Absolutely. And I also think that the best way to protect yourself through this, and I don't believe in the end of America. I think we can, fortunately, Trump's a businessman. I think that they'll try to think through this as best as they can. It's a heck of a lot better than the alternative. The alternative is Smiley Boy Mandani, who wants to put the names of 19 of the killers on the wall at the World Trade Center monument, which is disgusting. But they literally are going to have to sit back and fess up to some things. I think ultimately that will happen. But if you have gold in your portfolio and you are properly protected, it's important. We keep saying, Brandon, we said it constantly, do spring cleaning. Well, it's not even spring cleaning anymore. This is legitimately planning. You know, we talk about the 11 hour and 59 minutes. Well, we're there. Now, either you want to wait till it's 11 hours, 59 minutes, and 59 seconds and do something about it, or you can start doing something about it now.
Where do you see the housing market going? Do you see prices dropping? I mean, they haven't inflated here in Memphis, but I mean, they've gone up. I think the housing market here is down about 9% compared to 2022. We were never overheated like California, Arizona, other places. But what do you see going on? Because a lot of people are saying that the housing market is going to drop by 30%. You think so?
I think it will ultimately, but it won't drop because of a buyer market that you're looking at. I think that you're looking at people that can't afford the mortgage payments because the interest rates aren't going down. And I think Warsh is going to be forced to go against everything he might have said and raise interest rates. It's going to happen.
And when do you see that happening?
In the next 60 days. But it's already, the mortgage rates are already gone up on their own. And that's why if you read about it on Wall Street Journal, they stated that bunch of cancellations all over the country of people who are doing it. But I really believe that what you're going to be looking at out of all of this in the immediate side of it in the housing market is not the people who are selling for the buyers to buy. I'm looking for people who will be selling because they need to get out. They won't be able to afford that lifestyle. These people have inflated the value of their home, some of them, and other ones are living in houses that are still on the edge. And I think they're going to need to sell those houses in order to gain the money necessary to be able to live. I guess my comment is that I think when the big move in the housing market will be when the housing market gets started to get saturated with liquidations, not because not because of the fact that they're trying to get it sold to make money. They're going to need money. There's going to be a need in the housing market. I mean, when you see there's no responsibility here in Arizona. The people who were selling, who had houses they bought for $300,000 and then were selling them for $900,000 are now selling them for $700,000, $600,000, and I think they'll go down to $400,000. To me, when I bought my house, I buy it to live in, not to make money on. But that whole generation of thought is gone. And these people want to buy it and make money, and those days are over with. I think buying to rent, I think America is rich enough to rent. It's a smart move if you can. But I think that the housing market is going to have a major correction, especially in the the higher end market and the semi-custom market. Those end of things right now where people have overextended themselves all the time are going to be bleak.
So, true statement. The national debt's now officially bigger than the entire U.S. economy. True or false?
True. And we pay more money on our interest rates than we pay on the money that we're taking in. It's that disgusting, literally. How did we get here? Financial irresponsibility and going off the gold standard. If we never went off the gold standard, they could never have spent more money than there was in Fort Knox. How stupid were those guys in the white wigs when they came up with this? Because they did not want the geniuses running the country to spend more money than they had gold. I wonder why. Because that way they couldn't run up extreme debt that we couldn't pay. So be your own Fort Knox right now while you can.
All right, you can put gold into your IRA, and that's, of course, we don't give financial advice, we give financial opinion. But one of the things that's the most concerning are the people that this is the majority of this audience, our prime target generally here in largest demographics, 55 and older. Many of them have a lot of money in their 401k, their IRA, et cetera. The concern is that these folks could take a huge hit if the market corrects, like people like Ed Dowd and others are talking, and it may not come back in time to help them when they need to get that money out of those accounts, right?
Well, you'll wait until you've taken a big hit. And think about it. You're saying those people who have those accounts, okay? Do you saying anything regarding the financial people who sell it to you? Do you think they're going to lose a dime? They're going to lose nothing. They're going to make money, because they're going to charge you on your liquidations, by the way, and they're not going to lose a dime. They'll be saying, well, I'm real sorry. Just hang on. It'll come back. What if it doesn't? What if it doesn't? What if by the time it comes back, it's no longer a dollar, it's a token? So then you've not only lost on the valuation of what you have, but you lost on whatever you have left because it's been revalued. It's like a double dip financially. And then they're going to sit back. You got to understand that. Think about it. You'll take a hit, and then when they reprice your money, you're taking another hit. And that's when the housing market and everything else, with some of these guys and gals who spend money like drunken sailors, are financially irresponsible. But I don't want to be braggadocious. But in '79, when I had my company, we were the largest in the industry. We did $1 billion of business in December of '79, and our guys were kings. Our clients were happy as little piglets, but initially everybody else said no, 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 and that's just wrong. You've got to be one-dimensional right now. Don't be concerned about what your financial person's emotional feelings are going to be about what you're doing. They don't lose money. You do. Be smart. What our goal is, in deference to them, is not making you money. It's protecting and preserving you. It's as simple as it is. Making sure that when these times happen and you see them unfolding in front of you, you are financially in a position to make it through that. If you don't do that, you're foolish, and unfortunately, some people will not recover. They won't.
All right. There you go, folks. WorldviewGold.com, 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 1-877-864-1072, 1-877-864-1072 to get your free no obligation packet. We've been working with Swiss America now as a sponsor. I've done business with them. A lot of my friends have done business with them. A lot of you have done business with them. 1-877-864-1072. They've been around for 2 years?
44.
44 years, and never missed a buyback in those 44 years, right?
Never missed a buyback, never missed a delivery. Nobody's perfect. I think we have 15 issues that popped up of delivery issues in 44 years because it was a couple days late. But
everybody got their medals in the end.
Oh, everybody is absolutely tickled pink and happy and pleased. And we always help people who have been on the other end of it. And I don't think anybody can come. The biggest difference with Swiss America is we ship from our facility. Everybody understand what drop shipping is. You hear about it. You send these companies money, they go to a wholesaler, and the wholesaler ships it to you. If you look at the return address, it's never the return address or whatever suite number this company operates in. Swiss America's building, and as you know, Brandon, is as big as a post office with a lot of guns. Everything's shipped out of here under camera. You're more than welcome to come in if you think you're going to be a wise guy, but I assure you, you ain't leaving. That's for sure. But at the end of the day, there's not one thing that we do not ship from our building. And if you don't like what you get, we'll send you something until you do, and we'll always be here. Good, bad, or indifferent, we will be here. We've been here 44 years, zero debt, hundreds of millions in dollars of metals available for us. And we'll even send you a picture of Dolly and I that we're putting together.
There you go. And we are for October. And by the way, you can put gold in your IRA or take physical custody. He'll explain the difference between numismatic, 1933 and older, and the new bullion. All the details. The bottom line is, folks, education, 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 education. Inform yourself, do your due diligence, then make the decision best for you. Michael's there to answer your questions and provide education. And again, I think it starts with the free packet. No obligation, folks. No obligation, no risk, free packet. You can just fill out the form if it's easier at worldviewgold.com, worldviewgold.com. Or you can call 1-877-864-1072. All right. Thank you, Michael.
I'll be talking to you soon. And please don't mess around with anything for Dolly. I don't want to have to get involved.
That's it. Thank you. That's Michael Weiner checking in. We'll be right back.
3 years ago, the United States was stunned by an announcement from war-torn Korea. U.S. Army Private David Hawkins and 20 other prisoners of the communists had become turncoats. They had renounced their own country and disappeared behind Red China's bamboo curtain.
What had you heard? Well, only what our Chinese captors had told us, how great they were working toward socialism, the great stride that they were taking, bettering the life of the Chinese people who for so many thousands of years had lived a life of oppression under various governments.
All right, guys. I also pre-recorded an interview yesterday with Todd Bensman, and let's just roll to it. Here we go. Joining me now is Todd Bensman. Hello, Todd. Welcome back to the broadcast.
Hey, good to be here. Good to see you again.
You too, my friend. Oh, we have a lot to talk about. Todd has been a very busy guy since leaving the administration. He's writing over at the Federalist. He's working at the Heritage Foundation. I have all that right, correct?
Yeah.
He's got a brand new article out. Here it is. Trump is running out of time to end the refugee asylum abuse for good. Here's another one. James Tallarico's border policies could spark another Biden-level migrant crisis. And did Spain go full Trump to end the Ceuta mass migration crisis? Todd Bensman, August 10th. Todd, let's start out with that one in Spain. I mean, I don't know if I've had you on about that or not, but give us the update, your thoughts.
Sure. Well, we all remember the, 70, I think they're saying it's maybe more than that, 80,000 mostly young military-aged men swimming ashore of this little Spanish enclave on the Moroccan coast, Allah Akbaring their way up the beach by the thousands, and creating probably the most, visibly disturbing footage that I've seen since our own southern border crisis. What you saw there is what it looked like on our border every day for 4 years. So it was kind of a reminder of what can happen and why things like that happen. But the Ceuta case also tells us how to end it, reminds us how to end it. We know how to end these things the way Trump ended it at our border, which was to just simply expel everybody you can lay hands on instead of releasing them into the interior. It's not complicated. It's really that simple. If you let everybody in to stay when they come to your border, then they will come in mass to get the benefit. But if you turn them around, expel them, they won't spend the money to bother or the time to bother. And that's how Trump shut our border down on his very first day. We've had the lowest numbers crossing or attempting to cross in U.S. recorded history. That's how slow it is down there. The Spaniards, though, love this sort of stuff. That's a socialist, communist, extremely left-wing government. Prime Minister Sanchez loves mass migration. At least he says so. That's his base. Until he's faced with that sort of thing that we all saw, and his personal political power was at threat. His government was in an existential crisis. And when that happens, when you're going to lose your power, even the hardest left socialists will tear a page right out of Donald Trump's playbook. And that's what happened in Soweto. He decided to call the military out. He deployed them. He put barriers up on the water. And he had his people using truncheons to force them all back to Morocco. And today, almost all of them are back in Morocco. And most importantly is nobody is coming in. Why? I have to say it again. Because he turned them all back, there was no reward for doing it. And that's what stopped it. That's what always stops it. And that's the story that I wrote in that last piece you just pulled up there, is explaining how that works and why we need to remember that that's what happens when you use those tactics.
Let's move to the next article. President Trump is running out of time to end refugee asylum abuse for good. Tell me about that, please, Todd.
Well, probably one of my chief complaints about the Trump administration is that, yes, he closed the border. He did it in a certain way, but those are with policies that are easily reversed. The Soweto is a policy that's easily reversed. All you got to do is have another government come in and say, yeah, we're going to grant people asylum. We're going to let them stay while they adjudicate out for years their asylum claims. It's all about asylum. The reason that the people in Ceuta poured in like that is because there was a Supreme Court decision, a Spanish Supreme Court decision, that said that the Spaniards from this point on have to let you lodge asylum claims, and we have to adjudicate them. That means you get to stay during that process, which means you're pretty much in. So it's the same thing at our border. Asylum process is so long and laborious and is so abused by people that don't deserve it or have any eligibility for it, but they use it to be able to come in and stay. And that's the whole key. And the argument I make in this is that there are two things that the Trump administration needs to do to permanently banish this asylum problem so that it no longer acts as this magnetic tractor beam on the entire world. One is to pull out of the UN treaty. It's a 1951 Convention on Refugees that requires the United States to provide a chance for people to claim asylum. It's not binding, but it would be problematic. It's always problematic to have us part of a treaty. People can sue and whatever. The second thing is to just make 3 or 4 tweaks to the legislation that will permanently weld that shut forever. A couple of things that are like one-page amendments to the 1980 Refugee Act. It's all explained in the piece. And I don't see the Trump administration doing that. They have until January to even have a shot at it because the House is expected to go to the Democrats. If that happens, there's no chance at all that you can make the legislative fixes that are necessary to forever prevent a mass migration crisis like that. And I'm very worried. I mean, the clock is just running out and they're not doing it. So I'm not saying I didn't propose this while I was in the administration, but there's a good reason why I'm proposing it now on the outside. Maybe it'll get better airing from the outside than it did when I was in the administration. But those two things absolutely need to happen, at least make the effort to get that through legislation, through a pretty split Congress. We know it's not easy to get people on board.
Are we headed then to a overrun border? I'm looking at the book on the back wall there, your excellent book. Overrun.
Yeah. So
is that going to happen again?
The short answer is if a Democrat gets in January 2029, then January 20th, 2029, then on January 21st, we will have another mass migration crisis that's probably even worse than the last one, because those Democrats, which kind of brings us to the third article that I wrote about Tallarico. It's very typical. These Democrats, the candidates, do not understand what I was describing, the simplicity of if you let them in to claim asylum, you'll have a mass migration crisis on your hands instantly in one day. And when you refuse them asylum and entry to stay, they stay home. You have a secure border. And what I'm seeing from people like Tallarico, who is the progressive leftist running for John Cornyn's office in the Senate, when you look at when you dig down into his actual proposals for what he would do at the border, what he would push for as a senator, we're going to give them asylum again, and we're not going to deport anybody, which is exactly the perfect ingredients for another mass migration storm. And most of the candidates for president, the Democratic candidates for president, have the exact same ideas. They don't get it. They don't understand that what they're proposing, and most people don't understand it either, that what they're proposing is to restart asylum at the border. It's all over, folks. The second you do that, it's all over. You will see all these policies reversed in a single day.
Generate the outrage. Sorry, that's on my end. Keep going. So you're going to see that. you're going to see this if they're elected. And I wanted to go to Worldviewpedia real quick. And I want to put in there ID 2020, see what pops up. Because in early 2020, we were doing broadcasts of, and you've already mentioned the United Nations. And the United Nations, the Bank for International Settlements, which is the central bank of central bankers out of Basel, Switzerland, major corporations, they were all pushing for digital ID. In fact, here it is. I asked our research assistant software, it's continuing to print, because we've talked a lot about it, as you can see there. All right, now back to the top. What is ID 2020? It's a global digital identity program that describes itself as a time-bound exploration of alternative systems for individuals to prove they exist. It's an annual summit that convenes private sector companies, national governments, UN agencies, diverse nonprofits. Research highlights several major players behind ID 2020. The United Nations, Bill Gates, the World Economic Forum, the World Bank, Accenture, UN High Commissioner of Refugees, and they're behind the idea of sustainable development. And of course, we have the goal of the UN goals, 16.9, which is provide legal identity for all, including birth registration by 2030. I'm wondering again if this is where we're headed. Another crisis, another border crisis, more liberals taking over, more tracking of us. You got central bank digital currencies, which are really stable coins now, which you can't have a central bank digital currency apparently until after 2030. So after 2030, that expires in the legislation. But we're going to have stable coins. And all of a sudden, pretty quick, you've got yourself a biometric system for everything. And I'm wondering if they need a good crisis. You can't let a good crisis go to waste. Maybe that's what they need to, can get Republicans and Democrats to say, well, I'm tired of the double dipping on welfare and entitlement programs. And we need to know who's here. We have terrorism and et cetera, et cetera. I'm concerned that's how they're going to get the American people to buy into it. They're going to give up some of their liberty and freedom for so-called security.
I'm not that familiar with the system that you put up there, but my initial take on it, just from seeing who is proposing it, the UNHCR, the Gates people, it's not going to be good for border security or internal security either. It's all, but send me the links on that because it sounds interesting. I'd like to study it.
Yeah, we can definitely send you those. So let's go to another clip. We've played this the other night. This was by a general, okay? This was by a general, and let me close something so I have no audio. That take care of it, guys? Okay, I think I know where that's at. Hang on. All right, that take care of it? All right, here's the general. I want to tell you who this general is, by the way. This is Northcom Deputy Commander Army Lieutenant General Joseph Jared. He says the U.S. is unable to defend against an attack by a swarm of drones on U.S. soil. This will help everybody sleep well tonight. Here, listen to this.
The next threat to the homeland can be a swarm of inexpensive drones launched from inside our own borders, rather than a missile approaching from thousands of miles away. Does NORAD have the sensor coverage, authorities, and decision speed necessary to respond?
No.
And could you comment on that and on the gap today, the biggest gap you see?
Well, I mean, we don't have the sensors, and we're not, depending on where that swarm is going to attack, depends on whether we have any sensors at all. And so, and also whether we've got any effectors to get after that problem. So, we are ill-equipped right now to handle something like that. And obviously that is, we've seen it used. We're seeing it used on a daily basis around the world, and we've got to figure out how to mitigate that threat. And but we're not there yet.
Well, that makes everybody sleep well. And of course, we've been talking about those kind of things now here for a couple of years, particularly now that you've got what are reported to be Iranian drones in Cuba. And they're just unveiled one of their latest drones, I think, that flies lower and faster. I know you have a lot you discussed, a lot you were involved in you can't talk about. in this field, in this area. But can you speak to this, please?
I mean, the extent that I have familiarity with the, offensive and defensive drone capability, UAVs, it has to do with the border because that's what I do. That's my area. And I'm somewhat optimistic that we are working very hard and as fast as possible to develop counters to offensive drone capability. Because remember, the Mexican cartels are using the heck out of these things for everything from drug trafficking to bombing each other and to scout all along our border. And so, we are down there on our side with our own drones and our own technology and working pretty fast and furious to figure out how to counter those cartels. So, you know how it is, wars often produce innovation. And I think that we are seeing innovation happening at our southern border. Beyond that, I can't really talk too much about what I've seen and know, but I do know that the Mexican cartels are sending their people over to Ukraine they're participating in the Ukrainian war against Russia in the drone units so that they can bring that knowledge back to Mexico to work, employ those tactics and techniques and technology against their enemies and potentially against us as well. So there's a lot that's in open source. There's nothing classified about that, but it is happening, and it's definitely the whole UAV capability on all sides has really changed warfare as we know it. We see it everywhere.
So would you be shocked? Would you be shocked if the next 9/11 was a drone swarm attack?
I wouldn't be shocked if some of those Shahed drone type aircraft that Iran is using, like you mentioned just a minute ago, that Cuba's maybe got some of these things. We've seen what those do right now in the war between the U.S., Israel, U.S., and Iran. They're cheap, they're accurate, they can fly a long range, and they have a high explosive capability. By the way, I mean, if those things are 90 miles off the beaches of Florida, that means they're not very far from Mar-a-Lago.
Mm-hmm.
When you contemplate what we are doing with Cuba, we've got them surrounded, we're pressuring them, we're threatening them, we've got them economically crippled. I mean, we're doing things against Cuba now that we've never done not even since the Bay of Pigs. You have to think that that's about the president thinking and the Secret Service thinking about Mar-a-Lago. So that's speculative on my part, but I think it's informed analysis about why we're demanding that the Iranians get out of there and the Chinese get out of there and the Cubans kick everybody out and turn over the drones and all that sort of thing. They're not doing it. They're defying that. But anyway, the drone frontier is brand new and developing, and we better develop fast with it.
Well, it wouldn't shock me if one of these drones or some of these drones ended up hitting skyscrapers, condos of innocent civilians in Miami.
Somebody could do it. Somebody could do that. You could fire those off from Mexico. You could fire them off from Cuba in places in Central America. I'm not saying that anybody's about to do that or doing it right now. There's no intelligence that I'm aware of.
Mm-hmm.
But I can tell you that, sphincters are tightened up all around about that down there, in Latin America right now. The Iranians are down there, and they're mad. We killed their Ayatollah. They issued a fatwa, a religious ruling to exact revenge on the United States from all over the world. And they mean that. They mean that.
Well, we have the video footage. The IRGC, I'll try to find it in our catalog here, but the IRGC put out a video a few years ago. We were one of the first ones to play it. And in that video, the IRGC, they're seen in a half circle launching these huge Shahad-looking drones, what looks like out of the deserts of the Southwest. Could be Texas, it could be Arizona. And, they're definitely teasing this kind of thing. And again, now we have a general telling us we don't have any capabilities to deal with that.
Well, we need to get some fast because I take the Iranians at their word.
Exactly.
I mean, why wouldn't you? If you're in the security business, you take them at their word. It's not just about capability; it's about intent. So if you have the intent to do it and the capability, that's a pretty bad combination. And you're mad as a hornet because your Ayatollah got killed.
Yeah, exactly. All right. What else is on your radar? Anything else on your radar or anything else you're going to be talking about soon?
Well, I do have some pieces coming that have to do with what we're just talking about, the Iranian threat in Latin America. It's changed. It's shift-shaped. There's a lot going on there, and I'll be writing about that. I have written, and I guess hopefully things will be published here soon.
Well, where can we find them? Heritage Foundation or where?
Well, the best place to find Heritage, we publish in a variety of places, the Daily Signal. I think I'll probably publish the first one of these at the Daily Wire.
Mm-hmm.
But if you go to toddbensman.com and just check in on that every couple of days, I put everything I publish somewhere else up on my personal website just as a central clearinghouse to be able to find everything that I'm working on. It's toddbensman.com, pretty easy. And also, I have a Substack account now, a free thing. I don't charge anybody. I would never charge anybody money for that. But you can, if you go to my website, you'll find where you can subscribe to my Substack. And when I publish, I push a thing out on email, a newsletter out on all of my email about the thing that I just published. So that's another way to just stay close with what I'm doing and thinking and saying.
Let me ask you about, you mentioned South America and Iran. What about reports that Iran, the IRGC, are hiring Hell's Angels and other groups to be their front people and carry out potential attacks on people here in the homeland? Have you been right in on any of that you could talk about?
Not really. I know the Hell's Angels are involved with the cartels in drug trafficking, especially in Canada, but I haven't really heard too much about their involvement with the Iranians. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised, but remember that that Hezbollah, which is one of the Iranian proxies, is they're very security minded and sensitive about operational security, right? So they keep things in the family. Hezbollah is made up largely of like large families of people because they trust each other, cousins, aunts, uncles, that sort of thing. And I'm a little bit skeptical that they would risk operational plans that are big in nature with a bunch of white guys in the Hells Angels in California or something, who, even though they're bad guys and drug dealers, also might tend to be patriotic too, because they like our capitalistic system to use for nefarious profit making. But I don't know whether, Hezbollah would trust Hell's Angels. On the other hand, I've seen there was a case here in Texas about 10 years ago where the IRGC hired a Dallas guy, a Hezbollah guy, to kill George W. Bush and also attack the Saudi ambassador in Washington. And the guy they actually sent him $100,000 for the job. He takes the money and he goes down to Mexico and tries to hire a cartel guy. It turns out that it was a DEA informant, so the whole thing unraveled, and he's in prison now. That's the problem, from their point of view, with going outside the family, so to speak. Not that they won't.
Yeah. And then finally, what about then right over the border? How concerned are you about Iran infiltrating into Mexico and then getting up on our border and letting some of these drones go? Which, they're so small, they're so capable, they're so easy to transport now. Was that anywhere in your risk assessment that you can talk about?
I'm going to say that right now, northern Mexico is a high risk of discovery because there's so much military and policing and activity. U.S., there's surveillance. We've got spy flights. You might remember a couple months ago, we lost 2 CIA officers in Mexico. They were doing operations. It's not a safe place for them to bring a big old drone in. And not that they couldn't, and knock on wood, I hope I'm wrong, or I hope I'm right. Hope I'm not wrong. But places like Cuba, Nicaragua, and other less trammeled areas, maybe, those things have, 1,000-mile range. So,
well, what about just off the Gulf of America, off of a cargo ship?
Yeah, could happen. Theoretically, we can interdict those. Apache helicopters. I don't know what we're doing about that, but we have littoral ships that are capable of detecting those that are in shallow coastal waters, and we have the U.S. Navy. We have assets around. I mean, theoretically, we're looking. We've got radar, and we're in the air, eyes in the sky, and all the rest of that. So
yeah. Okay. Then finally, I've heard some guys, former military guys saying, and historians saying, we're at a more dangerous time than we were even during the Cold War. Would you agree with that assessment, with all the threats from whether it's Russia or China, cyber hacking, EMP, the grid going down, which of course congressional studies have shown if the grid goes down for a year, you're going to have 80 to 90% of Americans dead due to disease, starvation, and societal unrest. Then you add in drone warfare, all this new technology. Man, I mean, this kind of stuff wasn't around during the Cold War.
I mean, I'm going to leave that to minds greater than mine about that, who have, but I mean, remember that I'm not disputing that we have threats that are, multidimensional and technological beyond anything we've seen and diverse from all kinds of enemies. But we also are pretty good at defense in the homeland. I'm actually a little bit more worried about the couple of million American expatriates that live in Mexico and Central America that are soft targets. We have thousands of American businesses down there that might have some internal security guards or something like that, but we've got law enforcement personnel down there, diplomats. Something strange happened last year in Mexico City, for example, where it wasn't against an American, but there was the United States and Israel both in March of last year simultaneously publicly thanked the Mexican government for breaking up an IRGC plot to kill the Israeli ambassador in Mexico City. Thank you so much for breaking that up. And that's in Mexico City. just across the border a little way. Now, Mexico eventually denied, oh, that we didn't do anything at all. Nothing happened, leaving the whole thing like, okay, what? What happened down there exactly? But it just goes to show you that there's a lot more soft targets outside of the homeland than there are inside the homeland, I think. Lots of Americans living all over the world, lots of business people, conducting trade in all of these different countries that don't really have great security systems.
Well, from a psychological standpoint, of course, terrorism is about terror, and psychological terror is sometimes very, very powerful. The mind, the human mind, and of course, the emotions of the American people. And if you kidnap a bunch of Americans and then you start torturing them on video and releasing this video online on social media, I mean, obviously the trauma for the family, the individual going through it and the family, but then just the average American watching and looking, you can imagine the impact that would have. And then the impact that would have on international travel and the economy from that standpoint. But again, just psychologically, that's a very powerful thing when you start making Americans feel that vulnerable, when Americans are used to traveling all over the world and exploring the world and being tourists.
That's right. That's right. I mean, I don't want to be Pollyanna about it. We have a lot of very implacable enemies right now.
Todd Bensman, his website's toddbensman.com, toddbensman.com. He's with the Heritage Foundation and writes at a lot of different sites. You can also follow him on X. Here is his X account right here. Let's go back to the top of the page. There is his X account right there at Bensman Todd, at Bensman Todd, if you'd like to follow him, or toddbensman.com for all the latest. He puts it all there, as you heard. It's great to have him back after his time of service for us, the American people, in the Trump administration, working right alongside the border czar. So it's great to have you with us and back with us. Thank you, Todd, for your time today.
Anytime. Thanks for having me.
Todd Bensman checking in tonight. And we appreciate Todd. And we appreciate you, folks, and your support that keeps a program like this going so we can give a platform to guys like Todd Bensman. So thank you for your support. WorldviewFoundation.com. WorldviewFoundation.com. You also find our mailing address there if you prefer to support us through the mail. To help us as we continue to push out programming like this all around the world. By the way, we take all of these and we turn almost all of them into articles as well that you'll find at worldviewtimes.com, worldviewtimes.com. They're also transcribed, and then they're put into our collective database of 36 years of information known as Worldviewpedia, the premier biblical worldview research assistant. And you can join at worldviewtube.com/vault, worldviewtube.com/vault. All right, guys, that's our broadcast for tonight. You appreciate what we're doing here? We need your support. Worldviewfoundation.com, worldviewfoundation.com. Roll the music. Let's call it a night. Hey, we have a big mailing going out, in November. And if you'd like to be on that mailing list, one way you can guarantee to be on that mailing list is to order up our free business cards. They're free at worldviewstore.com. So when you order the free business cards to pass out to family and friends and tell them about the Worldview Tube Network, we'll also add you to our mailing list so you get our free newsletter. Do you like the new mugs? We only got 400 of them. They're handmade. Each individual medallion, handmade. They're going fast already. Get your order in now if you want one. Worldviewstore.com, worldviewstore.com. May God save America. Take care. Tonight on the Worldview Report, a Romanian F-16 shoots down an explosive-laden maritime drone with its cannon near the Neptune deep gas platform in the Black Sea. That's after Romania confirms it is not Ukrainian in origin. The Romanian president blames Russia, and the European Commission president calls it part of an escalating company of hybrid warfare against NATO energy infrastructure. Former Federal Energy Regulatory Commission Chairman John Wellinghoff, he renews his warning that destroying just 9 critical power substations